right. It's live. This is not Starbucks coffee. This is home coffee. This is a reusable mug I bought in New York. Recyclable. But I don't need to recycle it because it's reusable. So is everything working? Let's see. It hasn't caught up to the delay. It's not really out there yet. Testing, testing. It says there's audio. And this thing is ridiculous. 6 minutes. So yeah, many things going on. One thing is this Tom Brady thing. I actually think it is a big deal. I originally thought they were making a big hullabaloo out of nothing. But the thing is, it's just sports. But the NFL is pro cheating. He was actually doing that. How petty. It's like it's a game. If you don't follow the rules of a game, you're not really doing anything. The only point of the game is the artificial point created by the way the rules work. The only reason it's fun. I mean, should they just all go out there with the football, no rules? Yay! Would that be a game? So it's like, geez, you're making all this money off of the game. You don't want to even play the game. Makes no sense. Okay. Well, I'm a little early. I'm going to take a break.
Are we having fun yet? Hey there, Paul. How you doing?
Okay, you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you pretty well.
Okay, just wondering because I don't have headsets on, and I'm hoping I don't have no feedback.
It sounds pretty good to me.
Okay,
I seem to be getting an echo when I say something.
that might be because I'm not wearing headsets.
Ah, that could be. I'm not sure.
Give me a sec. Okay, see if you still get a feedback.
Hello.
Hello, people are queuing up. I got echo.
Yeah, I got an echo too.
Okay, it's still me. I'm watching through my TV, so everything gets messed up.
It's not too bad. Well, I like it. So what's up, Inventive? How you doing?
Oh, another day.
Paul, welcome. I assume that's Paul. Looks like
You
Paul.
responded to Paul when I said hello.
Yeah. So,
Those are some pretty cool posters you got there, Paul. Are you a big comic books fan? Did you read comic books, Paul?
I think he's still setting up. Uh-oh.
Oh, we lost him.
Must. Those were cool.
All right, still here?
Yeah, oh, and that's great. Yeah, you were just being asked about your comic book posters there. They look pretty cool.
Yeah, unfortunately, I got a little bit of. Let me close my curtain.
All right. So, yeah.
I thought I saw a comic book poster on your ceiling as well, Pyro, with a bunch of.
Yeah, my stepson gave it to me. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It's I guess there's the modern looking guys. It's funny what's happened. It's kind of neat the way they change the comic books go through these universes and they reboot. And I guess that's probably where we're getting, in the old days movies would reboot, but it was just because people had forgotten about the original one or whatever. I think comic books might have made that more legit, but it's weird because it does make your era of, like I read them in the 80s, 70s and 80s. And that was a pretty, the Flash I knew doesn't even have the same name now. They reboot him so hard. But
no, he still exists. It's like
no, it's a different guy though. He was a different name.
Well, it was Barry Allen at first, and then he got sucked off into another dimension, and so then Wally West took over.
Right.
And was the Flash.
But didn't something else happen too since then? I thought there was something else. Another one. DC supposedly got rid of all of these parallel universes and somehow warped down to one universe, right?
Yeah, and it sucked. So they're killing off that universe and redoing the whole thing again.
My era was great, and the Flash was in the middle of it because the Flash was sort of had the sci-fi aspect always, and so it worked perfect with the multidimensionality. That was a part of the Flash thing anyway. So the whole idea. Flash was one of the ones that always was part of the multiverse and meeting the old Flash with the tin, hat and the old Superman that had married Lois Lane, and it was cool. I liked it. The Flash was a good one.
Right, because he can run faster than space and time.
It just made for a lot of weird science fiction stuff, but also, I don't know if you ever read him, but like he knew there was a colony of a super intelligent apes in a hidden city somewhere on a hidden island that they cloaked somewhere, that were his friends, and he often had villains that would be from another dimension and stuff. So I just like that part.
Yeah, there was Ape Sapien and Gorilla Grodd. There were a couple of those
Oh, maybe we talked about this once before. Or those were characters that had some sort of spin-off from that
Well,
Flash?
they were on the Monkey Island. They're
Were
super
they just
intelligent
part of the
apes.
Flash stories, or did they have? I'm remembering some talking about this with someone, and that there's some spin-off or something. Those that city at least was used, again after I stopped reading comics. Let's put it that way.
Well, there's the Flash.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, they've never made a good Flash thing, except for I saw some of the episodes of the show they have now on it, the young Flash thing. It looked like it might be good, and people say it's good. I haven't kept watching it yet, though. I'll have to
I
binge
watched
watch
about the
it.
first 5 minutes of the first episode, and I was like, no, I'm done with this. But
They've never really made a good one. I mean, they had a live action one back in the day. It was no good. About the closest is the old like Justice League cartoons, are sort of okay, but even those weren't good.
I liked them. I thought they were good cartoons.
I liked them as a kid. I watched them all. They were the best for
And I'm watching
being.
Gotham right now. I think Gotham is a good show.
Oh yeah, my
Yeah.
stepson watches that. So yeah. Well, I wasn't sure if people were going to show right up. I mean, we can whatever topics we want to talk about it open. I mean, when I opened up the room, I actually was talking about sports a little because I mean, I don't take sports culture seriously, but it is just a game. So this Tom Brady thing, it's like kind of like losing. It's what's going on. The Lance Armstrongs, legless marathon runners, the O.J. Simpson. I mean, these are all. I mean, I don't think I have a hero worship, but I did not expect Tom Brady, who didn't play college ball, right? He's one of these guys that's like discovered by going to the tryout, and then he's third string and gets a chance because of an injury, and then he's just a cheater. It's like it's not quite to the level of the Lance Armstrong, but there's something where it's not just the stupidity of sports. It's like I don't expect much from these guys, but to play their game seriously, because without the rules there is no game. That seems reasonable. And Lance Armstrong's, of course, going to always, I think, for hundreds of years, probably be this classic example because beats cancer, wins all these things. And the fact that he cheated isn't even the biggest deal. I don't know if you followed any of that, but the biggest thing with Lance is that he screwed over other bicyclists that weren't lying cheaters, destroying their reputation because they were telling the truth. So I was talking about that. You know what I'm talking about, right? With the Tom Brady, do you know, with the Super Bowl
Is
and
that the
stuff?
football was deflated?
Right. And so the thing is, I thought it was just like much ado about a mistake and who cares. But no, some dude took him into the bathroom and deflated him on purpose. And it looks like Tom Brady either knew or was the guy that had the dude do it, right? And that's what the NFL report basically says in its weird, non-really committal way. They say they think Tom Brady knew about it at least. So, okay, so it's like doing spitballs or something. Kind of minor, but, this was a playoff game. And really, it's like, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, it doesn't matter. But the game is nothing but rules. And as far as I'm concerned, you take their Super Bowl rings away. This is how they got to the Super Bowl. They cheated. Whether it was even just the guy on his own going into the bathroom with the balls and deflating them, whatever. They cheated. They don't get their Super Bowl. That's part of sports. Sometimes the game is invalid. Foul. The whole game is a foul. And if it's one team's fault, cheating or accidental cheating even, right? Accidentally having a non-regulation field or something. Boom, you lose. You don't get to win the Super Bowl and pay a fine. That's ridiculous. To take the game seriously, you take away their Super Bowl rings. You give the Seahawks Super Bowl rings and all the prize money, and everybody goes, well, thanks, Patriots. Not only did you lose the Super Bowl, but we basically didn't get a Super Bowl in 2015 or whatever. But
Yeah,
anyway,
one interesting approach is with the Magic card tournaments I used to go to. Was they at some point made a rule where both players are responsible for the rules being followed. So if your opponent doesn't know what he's doing or something, that you need to tell him or call a judge over or whatnot, so that If something
Kind of
foul is going on, then both players will be held responsible. And that way, both players are.
that's cool. I like that. It's kind of like with Go. Like Go is very much up to the players as to when it ends. You know, and it's a judgment call that's just distributed.
I don't understand why the balls were not under the control of the refs to begin with.
I know.
So
why have the teams provide them? That is a good point. Yeah.
I mean, right now, all you had to do is change the rule that the teams no longer control the balls. Period. Done.
I was surprised to find that out. I did not know it was that way. I would have thought that that was something the NFL did and provided the balls and all the millions of extra balls, decided if the fans were supposed to throw them back from the, I mean, I would think that's like, this is a branded NFL thing. That's what makes it a sport, is that all the balls are the same within some tolerance. You'd think they just make them. But, on the other hand, those things cost a few $100s a piece. Maybe it's just penny accounting. Yeah, I know, but maybe it's
salaries.
Right, but it's penny accounting, and the league's going, you teams can afford that, because it's $5,000 of balls or something. I mean,
they can pay for it all.
Oh, obviously
they
could.
Just don't have control.
Well, and they could even charge for it and whatever. But I have a feeling that it comes down to the easiest accounting thing or something. It makes no sense as a sport. As a sport, you don't have the team, Zamboni their field. Well, I guess you might. They might have to hire that guy. Yeah, it's a little silly though. The league should be in charge of making sure everything's to regulation. Seems obvious.
Right. So just change the rules.
So hey, inventive. I used to play Magic the Gathering. I was working in computer games with a lot of gamers when Magic the Gathering Wizards of the Coast first started, and I've been wanting to sell, especially now that I came back to the mainland, my cards, because I have cards that are from the very first printing with black backgrounds, and then the second with black borders, and then the second printing with white borders. And I mean, I have one card that's supposed to be worth like $500, even though it's been used, but just like 5 times. But collectors are like, but was it ever used? They can tell if you played with it once. I played probably like a dozen games or something way back in the days, late 90s.
I think there's guides you can tell, like if you look on the internet and there's guides that will to price your cards, and to be able to grade them. And then I think if you've got a good eBay account with a good history, then that's probably the best way to go.
I don't. Now that I'm over here, I think I'm just going to find a game shop down in Boston or something and go in one day and probably they'll get a good deal, but it should be thousands of dollars worth of cards because they're the first couple series.
Yeah, like the Black Lotus out of that set is worth a few $1,000s, I think.
Yeah, I don't have that. I have some Ruby thing that's worth.
The Ruby thing is worth quite a bit. Yeah.
And I had a couple. I went through them, and actually we have a little, because it's the mainland. Even though I'm up in Maine, there's a little game shop, and I went in there one day. They have a little miniature bowling. We went miniature bowling. I don't know if you've ever seen this kind of bowling. It's like a smaller gauge bowling ball. But anyway, they also have a game shop, and they were all playing in Magic. And I was like, oh, this is a good sign. Yeah, people are still playing that with the new cards. So I know that means the old collectibles are still worth it. So yeah, so I should have, like, if I sold it with knowledge, it could be like $10,000 worth of cards. But the way I'll sell it to somebody that has the knowledge and care, it's probably $3,000 of cards or something like that. Because even the old ones I have that aren't valuable are like 50 cents a piece, and they add up. I just have like I think 3 decks worth of cards, 4 decks. It's red and green. My friends actually selected me out a red and green just so I'd have a confident enough deck to play against them. So it's not many cards, but then they all they focus around the red and green.
I like Magic because it's like legal cheating. Like if a card says something on it that contradicts the rules, then the card takes precedence.
On account of we got your static.
Oh, plug and unplug.
It's from you. I forget, where are you located on account of odd?
He's in Canada.
Oh,
I'm not sure where in Canada.
sounds more like Thailand. Internet. Okay.
I think
sure
that might have been his
it's not
headphones.
India? I'm just teasing.
Uh,
But anyway, I'm sure people would be bored by this, but I will just say, yeah, I've designed games and worked in games and was always a gamer and things. It is cool when the rules are down to the card. It's a thing about the game of life. I always thought that is an underutilized game principle because, again, the rule is on the space. To a certain degree, Monopoly brings that in, whereas you see none of it in Risk, really, that the rule is based on the space. I like the idea because you can have really intricate game systems when you get localized rules, basically. I have a game I've always wanted to build. I've built some prototypes. It's like a board game where basically the principle is each piece has rules. If a bunch of pieces have the same rules next to each other, it might look like a game of Monopoly or Clue or something, but it doesn't have to because every space actually has its own rules. So it's a cool, and Magic definitely that's the whole idea of the card games. Um, and they all came Pokemon and all the billion-dollar things are really rip-offs of the Magic. Magic totally introduced that. As far as I know, as a gamer, they didn't have the card battle rule based system.
yeah, Magic was the first, but I don't know if I'd call them rip-offs as much as maybe kind of they're kind of riffing on the idea. They kind of
No, yeah, it's a
take the
general
central
purpose game
idea.
principle. Yeah, it's a general
Yeah.
purpose game principle. It's meant to be copied. Yeah, but it was a rip off in the sense of they did the Pokemon card thing. Just those guys knew about Magic. Magic was super popular among the gamer crowd when it came out, which means none of the regular people in the world knew about it. But then the gamers that work in the companies that make games for regular people, kids generally, they knew about Magic and they said, hey, this thing proved itself. But it's not a bad ripoff like they shouldn't have done it. It was great. I'm sure that's one reason Magic is still going strong is by having mimickers and sort of lower quality, less hardcore. Because Magic, at least when I played it, part of the thing is it's Wizards of the Coast is a bunch of gamers, so it's really well tuned. It's pretty well tuned. I assume they've maintained that. I don't know because I don't play it anymore, but for 20 years, a long time.
Well, I think there's 15,000 different cards in the game now, so if you have access to them all, you can certainly have a first turn win deck, which isn't fair, right?
Yeah. So let's free everybody from the Magic the Gathering discussion. Yeah. What's up? What's up on account of odd? Do you have something on your mind?
Oh, I thought we were going to be talking about
Andrew, yeah.
feminism. By the way, before I begin, I'm always my connection is always screwy. Am I messing anything up or?
No, and that's fine too. And actually, it's mostly just the static and noise. The internet. Anyway, it's great right now. Actually, you were totally
okay.
By the way.
Just let me know.
When it cuts out, I will let you know, but it doesn't matter too much. It's better to take advantage of this global communication than worry about the fact that it's not perfect yet.
Well, yeah. But yeah, it's I don't know. Thought we had a topic, and it's not a huge thing dear to my heart, but it's interesting enough to discuss.
Go for it.
Well, it was vaguely feminism, right? What was the?
Well, what was the actual? Definitely very vague. We don't. There's been a bunch of things come up, and then I was off for a while. The feminism thing is either a topic here or in a way, I was just mentioning this guy Quintica has been trying to organize. You might have seen him trying to organize a feminism thing. I've been trying to talk about that. I've been thinking about it a lot. I still watch this whole anti-feminism. We should call it third wave anti-feminism or something. And so I'm interested in that. In this group, we keep talking about all these esoteric knowledge, information, and physics. But yeah, let's bend down into. Yeah, you want to talk about feminism?
Well, as I say, it's not something that's a huge issue for me, but it is something that one notices on the internet. It's interesting to see, the MRAs and men going their own way, whatever the acronym for that is, and all this kind of thing. And you know, for the life of me, I can't really see what the issue is because I just don't understand people who seem to sincerely believe that women have some sort of power over men.
Well, but come on. Okay, so but women do have power over men, especially, let's say, can you imagine a kind of man or a man, let's say every man at some point in a certain situation, like puberty, that some men outgrow and a lot of men don't because they don't answer the questions in there, or they settle on an interpretation that is frustrating to them, and so they still have to go over and over it. And I think there's certainly you can't say there's no grain of truth like okay, let's put it this way. My thing for years, and I feel I figured this out in a way that was self-effacing, was, why do women rather seem to go for assholes? So many women that are especially attractive or whatever catch your eye against the even conscious will, and your heart is all aflutter, and these women end up going, and it seems like, for assholes. Now, I asked this in an open-minded way. Is it because I'm just bitter and those guys aren't really assholes? And I answered that, no, they're assholes. And, so I think a lot of people are not finding answers satisfactory to themselves about this question. Now, I actually think I understand. I think both men and women tend to get attracted to the assholes, and it's because of assertiveness and honesty and knowing where someone stands. Women don't actually, Mr. Nice Guy might go, hey, I'll do whatever you want. And the woman's like, you're not being honest. You're trying to be fake and become whatever I want. I want a person that is a certain way to judge. And so an asshole, by being so more overt, just satisfies that thing. And so there's a systematic reason that this illusion appears to happen. In reality, there's some truth to it, but it's not something you want to blame women for, because men go through the same thing. There's women that want some guy who's a nice guy, and he's trying to pursue some jerk woman that's highly attractive, and there's reasons for that. Okay, so I think what's happened is some of these guys are just in this mindset. Now, I think the most healthy part of blaming women, that is, rather than seeing some systematics and realizing individuals still exist. The MGTOW thing, which is men going their own way, that I think is, ironically, it's in a way it's the most pathos-filled, or you could say pathetic, but in a technical sense, it's pathos-filled. Oh, never mind. But it's the most healthy reaction. If you're going to think that the whole thing is rigged, because it could be, right? Because even if women are not individually to blame, it could be that in the beginning of the 21st century, the situation is screwed up, and it's not going to be satisfying to these men. Going their own way, that's what we should be doing every day. We shouldn't have to be bitter about our romantic history in order to go our own way. So to have a movement that says, hey, you know what, guys, don't sweat it, just go your own way, I think is actually the healthiest expression of this movement, which on the other part is just like all hating on feminism. It's like third wave anti-feminism. It's a hobby, it's a hate. It's like a hater hobby.
Well, yeah, I guess it just depends on what people believe the fundamental or ultimate nature of feminism is, really. I always thought it had to do with making sure that women had legally the same rights as anybody else does, i.e. men. And, perhaps promoting issues that are peculiar to women, but not at the exclusion of anybody else. It's like, okay, I pick up Malcolm X and I read the autobiography, and I hear him saying all these horrible things about, white people and Jews and stuff like that. And I tend to sort of read around things like that, because I just sort of say, okay, that's not very nice, but the man as a whole, I get what he's doing here. He was saying things that nobody could say to black people unless they had proven their credentials. Only Nixon could go to China type thing. Like he was extremely hard on black people, and he had to establish his credentials, I guess,
Really,
in advance.
what are you talking about? Because I mean, I could reconstruct a memory of that, but what do you mean? He was? I mean, I remember he.
Well, I'm not going to be terribly free with my language here, but I'm going to use the N-word in a sort of clinical sense here. If anyone objects to it, I won't.
The whole black family and the father and single family thing, that was only just beginning. I mean, what was he criticizing?
Well, basically he said, if you don't want to, and again, I say this completely clinically, I'm not saying that I agree with this verbiage, but that's kind of what his thrust was. Don't want to be treated like a nigger, then don't be one. It's kind of... He basically said, look, you're better than that, and you're playing right into the man's hands whenever you decide that you're just going to buy into whatever he says.
Okay, right, but you're not talking about things like being a gangbanger or anything. That wasn't going on. You're talking about Uncle Tomism. He criticized African Americans. He criticized African Americans for example, being deferent and stuff. The amazing thing about the Black Panthers is the way they really started and got popular was exercising their right to bear arms, right? All the way into the California state capital, which because of the era was theoretically an acceptable thing. They all get mowed down today. So as far as progress going into the future, we wonder about this. And yet there's this NRA gun nut thing of like, well, people shouldn't get away with that. I actually am old school. I think it's good that you could get away with that if you're a law-abiding citizen. Then, so it's amazing. There was always this semi-militant thing, but then again, there was always the thing of they didn't go there to shoot up the place. They went there with guns to show, look, we got guns. We could shoot up the place. We're not gonna. We're just citizens like that.
Yeah, but again, that's the kind of thing that's aimed at quote unquote white society. That's kind of I would call that a publicity stunt meant to sort of, I don't know, change the broader society. Whereas I think Malcolm X's general thrust was drop slave mentality, black man. Stop sucking up to people. Stop defining yourself by definitions. Be proud of who you are. I don't think that he believed that African Americans were doing that. I think that he believed that African Americans were complicit in their own subjugation by buying into this narrative that said, okay, you're nothing but an N-word, and he said, don't want people to treat you like that, then don't behave like that, then don't suck up to the man. And not only that, he also said you're responsible also for your own bad habits and everything. And so you couldn't get an African American leader to talk like that about, like you say, the gangbangers or a crackhead or something like that. He was very hard on these people, at least in his rhetoric. He says, I was there, I dragged myself up out of that cesspool. What makes you think you can't? You want to just sit there and whimper and say, I'm just a poor, persecuted black guy, I can't do anything? Wait a minute, he said. And that was a harsh language, if you ask me. Harsher a lot.
Wait a second. Let's wait a second, because the black community at that time was not beset by gangism and broken families. No.
It was the underclass, and all underclasses are
that
kind of thing.
No, the black family was still a nuclear unit up until the 60s.
I'd say that it still is to this day, but the African American underclass is just like any other underclass: broken families, criminal activity, addiction, things like that.
Stuff a certain percentage, I guess. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, I guess there's some truth to that. Yeah, there's exceptions because of culture.
Yeah, if you're an underclass, you have these disadvantages. And he
anyway, I want to say hi to Heitla today, and his hand is raised. And I also want to say praise dog, praise dog. Praise dog. See, I'm big on the praise dog thing, because you praise God, what does he care? He's like, yeah, you're supposed to praise me. But if you praise dog, the appreciation that you get, they really love to get that. So anyway,
I just wanted to, I was listening to, I've seen the film Malcolm X. It got a long, long time ago. I'm just wondering what you're actually talking about. I was just wanting catching up. You know, I've been mucking about and settling down.
Well, can I summarize? Let me try to summarize. Okay, so Heitley was Anna Kanavad was talking about Malcolm X was somewhat critical of African American culture, saying, you know, straighten up your act in some sense or another. And then we were sort of debating what he was talking about, because I'm saying, well, my understanding of that, at first I didn't know what Anna Kanavad was talking about. My understanding of what he's talking about is this aspect of Malcolm X criticizing the complicity of Black America in thinking that the white culture was superior, whether it's trying to act white, whether it's acting subservient and, you know, putting up with racism, looking the other way, accepting your role as an underclass. And Anna Kanavad is saying, no, there was more to it. It had to do with the aspects of the African American culture. I'm denying that, because I really think that this idea of broken families and gang culture, especially the gang culture, is something that happened since the 60s. Now, there's truth. Anna Kanavad was pointing out that poverty-stricken classes do have higher incidences of single motherhood and things like this, and sort of that life drama that you could deal with. That's true. So he has a point there. On the other hand, I don't think there's any argument that the whole gangification and baggy pantsiness thing, that wasn't happening at all, and couldn't have, due to racism, and you couldn't get away with that. So with that kind of flamboyant, open behavior in your urban environment in the 60s and 50s and before, if you were African American. So I mean, I think there's points on both sides, and there's definitely some truth that Malcolm X was, you know, he was a cultural critic. It wasn't all hate whitey or anything like that. He was a cultural critic of both sides, and I thought always acceptable in my point of view as being an individualist, where his generalizations weren't meant to be that there couldn't be a white person that saw past this bullshit and didn't play this game that he was talking about. Because he did make a lot of generalizations. It's not that hard to find writing of his where he has some generalization that here in the 21st century sounds a little bit, you know, naively bigoted in its own right.
Was he the guy? Did he believe that blacks and whites couldn't really live together and we had to separate?
For a while.
He didn't finish his time.
A lot of his life, but at one point he was a segregationist. Yeah.
Well, the story sort of is that he softened in the end and saw more of the light of the Martin Luther King approach integrated with the stand up for yourself approach. You know, be tall and stand proud, but he's, you know, most people agree he softened and became less violent in his rhetoric. And I don't really think that he ever said be violent. It's more like, you know, have a big stick, and, you know, that's sort of threatening in itself, saying arm yourself in any sense at all. But he never said that, like, we have to overthrow this, or in the sense of like we couldn't live together.
He did say some things that can't be taken as any other way but racist. But the point I was trying to make, Hyfladay, was that, you know, as like the original subject, I guess, was feminism, but I'm game to talk about race as well.
You're the one that switched it over. I wanted to segue back.
I wasn't after you got onto it. Yeah,
no, I think it's interesting. We're definitely, look, let's put it this way. I'm going to take a break for a sec. I have 5 minutes, and so I won't talk over anybody. But let's talk about this. I thought it was interesting. You segued into racism, and I think it is related, and we can learn by thinking about how we think about racism to this feminism kind of subject. Yep. So, yeah, you're the one that kind of related them in a
absolutely. The original thing was feminism. I was just trying to say that that there's these hate-filled feminists who you know, they just seem to hate men and everything. Okay, well, I get that, but I say that, you know, to a certain extent, most sane people just sort of look beyond that in the same way that most people generally looked beyond the rather nastier things that Malcolm X had to say. That's all. And, you know, I think that a lot of people in quote-unquote white society to this day can't see past the bad things that Malcolm X said. and the fact that he was a Muslim. But apart from that, I think that you know, generally speaking, Malcolm X is seen, I find, at least by the white Canadians I know, as having been a positive force in American life. He's not seen as a hate-filled racist, the way that, you know, some people at the time thought of him. And so basically what I'm saying is, I believe it's incumbent upon us. I don't know if we're talking racism here or sexism, but in both cases, I think that it's incumbent upon the people who are not perhaps, don't have quite the same personal investment in it, and sort of, you know, be a little bit forbearing with the more, I don't know, crazy or militant types in both cases. So that was just my 2 cents worth when it came to things like men's rights advocates and men going their own way. That's what I think.
I think the recent stuff with the men's rights activists and the feminism has to do a lot with that Gamergate issue, where the games are supposedly victimizing the women through stereotypes. And I think Malcolm X's point might be relevant, that you shouldn't be complicit in your own victimization. And, you know, if there's a video game that objectifies women, you shouldn't try and be that object. That you should, you know, just be your own person and not be affected by the video game.
Yeah. Like, again, in a certain sense, Malcolm X would have sort of said, so what if they call you something bad? Nothing to do with you. Who cares what they think, one way or the other? You are you. You know, and yeah, and I guess that is, you know, it's kind of in the same vein, really.
Could I add something? Am I coming through okay?
Yeah. You sound good, Andrew.
Yeah, the Gamergate thing I just wanted to say is interesting because so I think everyone here has probably played a game where there's a third-party character who doesn't have a name, and depending on the game, you could kill them if you want to, you can steal from them, it doesn't matter. But in what sense is doing that to a woman, a female character, or a male character, like all the shoot-'em-up games where you kill tons and tons of soldiers, which are usually male? In what sense does that say something about men in general? That's what I've never understood about the Gamergate thing and about victimization. You play a game like Hitman, and I don't know if anyone's seen the Anita Sarkeesian videos where she shows clips from Hitman putting a girl in a chest or something to hide her body or something like that. In what sense does that say something about how a person treats women in the real world? I think that connection is not made. What you do in a video game does not translate into your behavior out in the real world. So I don't. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think Hitman certainly stuffed a lot of guys in trunks as well and hid their bodies.
Yeah.
You know,
I think,
mean, you know, if we're talking about, like, I don't know how Gamergate relates to rights. You know, well, it just seems like, oh, we think that these games are offensive, and so
it seems to me
they shouldn't say that. But
the main message of the Gamergate was that what we do in these video games somehow translates into some hidden misogyny in society. But I think that's a non sequitur. I don't think that connection was clearly made. So I'm just curious if anyone else saw that.
Well, is there a, could I pose the question, do people think there is a kind of underlying social sexism going on with men, with the way they feel about women?
If there were, what kind of evidence would we have to find to make that claim?
Well, the nature of the subject is we're collecting and we're sharing now anecdotal impressions. My impression is that yes, that it's, well, a recent example I've cited and come across relatively recently is when women submit papers for publishing and they're peer reviewed, and if they know the paper's from a woman, they score it down more. That would be less anecdotal evidence and more hard evidence. But when they don't know the gender, everybody gets scored. They get scored higher, and it even happens by women on women. You know, when they know it's a woman, even women are prejudiced against other women by that example.
I came across another example about, I think it was done in California, a study where it showed, where they took it was one of these sort of role-playing kind of experiments where you put people in some situation and sort of fake some sort of event. In this case, it was individual women getting into trouble in some small way, and there were men and women around. Invariably, the women asked men for help, and invariably, men offered to help women, whereas other women just disregarded the problems of other women. Same idea, really, eh? So, you know, yes, sexism works absolutely both ways. And one of the I would say that the male sexism is sort of offensive. The female sexism is kind of, what do you call it, veto-ish? In other words, they want to prohibit everything, or at least the female sexism is that. You know, they just want to stop doing that, don't do that, don't do that. Without any incumbency of suggesting something else.
So humans act like humans, huh?
What's that?
So humans act like humans.
It would seem so. And so it's, both sides are sexist as hell, if you ask me. That's what I think.
Did you ever see the study where they did cartoons and they made had different children to say, and they were asked questions about how do you feel about these different characters, and they would change their complexion, in other words, make them white or black, and how they would change their opinion of who did something wrong in this situation. Yeah. And even the black kids said the black kids were the ones they just didn't trust.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that would have driven Malcolm X insane. But that's what he spoke out against.
Can I just say that
sounds like racism. What's going on here?
When people come to the conclusion that there's sexism on both sides or racism on both sides, they feel like, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I agree it's true, but that's not the point. If there's half the population getting 70% of the pie, and the other side, half of the population is getting 30% of the pie, and I exaggerate just for emphasis and to make my point, but it wouldn't matter. The point is the pie's not evenly distributed, and the point is not to sit back on one's laurels and say, well, you're sexist like I'm sexist. The point is to resolve the inequality.
That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm saying is
I'm not saying you wasn't, but lots of people are when they are like that. I'd hope you understand that.
What I'm trying to say is you have to be able to see things from the other person's point of view, and you also have to see the other person's, I don't know what you call it, weak areas. Because for every sort of quote-unquote man-hating feminist, there's another one who unfailingly buys her weekly, or probably another 20, unfailingly buys her copy of Cosmo, which is female self-objectification gone insane.
I don't really think the objectification is the big problem. I mean, you were saying some things last time we were together that were a little bit more to the point of what I think is the issue with sexism in the first world, which is there was a quote by some... I forget who it was exactly, one of these blogs about the Mad Max movie, and that there's a strong female character in the trailer. So, one of the things he said is that we should just need to admit that, men are physically stronger. But then he went on to saying one of the distinctions was logic. Like, women are more touchy-feely, and you were getting into that on and we need a counterpart. So I'm going to assign you the role of the misogynist.
All right, I want to.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. I'm just diffusing the fact that I'm calling you a misogynist.
I know. Well, I'll put it. Anecdotal evidence only. My experience is women do think completely differently from men, and there's no point in pussyfooting around that.
Right. But can I just pull you a second, and I can't because you said you made the point that we have to look at things from other people's point of views. I think what was on the table from the guy with the big beard or whatever, Andrew.
Oh, Andrew. Okay, sorry.
And between Anna Canterbury and myself, and that I was trying to table, was whether we can agree that whether it exists. I mean, sure, everybody should look at everybody's point of view and blah 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 blah. But we can't have a discussion on sexism, I don't think, about whether we can, establish positions as to whether it exists and whether, and if point of view is noteworthy, if it's in objection to, say, I say it exists, and you say, no, it doesn't exist, consider it from this point of view, and you see that it doesn't exist, or something like that. But yeah, sure, we have to take different points of view. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, I agree. But what I'm saying is, okay, I think that the original point was it's always more fun to talk about the extremists, right? So I'm talking about the angry feminist, the one that doesn't like guys, and I'm also, I guess we'd also be talking in this case about MRAs, not going so far as to talk about true forcedness or whatever.
May I interject? That's what I'm trying to say very politely. Is I have no idea why you're talking about these things, because there was a dialogue and a discussion about whether it existed. Andrew asked, how do we assess it? And I said, well, there's an example of assessment, and I'm campaigning for the fact that it exists. And you want to talk about the extremists, you want to talk about the points of view, but without actually saying anything.
I have a question. Let me just interject as a moderator. First, what exists? And second, what camera do you use? Because you don't have a headset and we have no echo. Everybody wants to know what camera to buy that accomplishes.
Logitech. It's a Logitech 9000.
Okay, good to know.
Quite HD camera. Yeah,
it's got good noise cancellation. So, but what is the thing that you're campaigning about the existence of exactly?
Well, I'm asking, is society prejudiced against women? Right? I've given an example, a non-anecdotal example, which correlation isn't causation and all that. Maybe I don't know whether that applies, but I give an example to suggest that it does. If I did some work, and I'm not a major feminist activist, but I also offer the anecdotal information that people, particularly males, can be very prejudiced, and I throw that on the table and say, what do you guys think? Do you think it exists in the first point? Because
it absolutely exists.
Well, I know you do, Pyro.
Well, how could anybody deny it? I mean, don't we have a world culture? If you take the world as your domain for culture, I mean, for example, I think one solution to this problem we're having now is, these guys are acting like it's a first world problem, the complaints of the feminists now. But really, I mean, feminism should be in the Peace Corps mode. Feminism needs to be spread to the rest of the world. And that's what, I mean, somebody that's really devoted to feminism as a kid should probably have an opportunity to go.
Well, we can't talk about what. Sorry. This you're doing what I've just used.
Well, let me back up. Then. Okay, I'll let you go, but let me back up. All I'm saying is
everybody see where everybody falls on the thing.
Okay, let me put it this way. I'm saying that if the domain is the world, obviously we have a lot to do in the realm of feminism still. If it's you can argue about the UK until the cows come home.
US, UK, let's talk about where we live,
Well, yeah, no, I think there's a problem there too, but like you said, that's boring. Right. Everybody knows I still think there's a problem, and I think we should focus on the international problem, though.
Well, like to hear the others, and I mean, me and you are
my room.
Very close on feminism.
Okay, fine, the others go ahead and speak.
But, Piero, why call it the world needs feminism? Why not call it the world needs human rights?
Well, I
guess I see feminism differently. I see feminism as a power base. I think it's better to say human rights, to spread human rights, and not.
No, but the thing is, if you're gonna, the reason, the answer to that is if you're gonna spread human rights, you have to do it one at a time. You can't say, hey, don't go protest in on behalf of the coal miners. There's also textile workers. No, you have your coal miner activists and your textile worker activists and your feminism activists. You have all of these specialists, and in my experience, these specialists do come together and work on the broader issues. I mean, that's why I stand by feminists, because they showed up when I was protesting the Iraq War, and they're social justice warriors. So really, I am happy to broaden this to defending social justice warriors, which is evidently next on the block for the anti-activist crowd.
The problem though is, when do you shut them down? Like, how far do you go? It's better to promote an idea that has a conclusion, has a finale. But if you promote feminism, it will never end, and that's why it's getting out of hand now, and that's why the MRA started showing up. I think Hegel, by the way, would be pleased because of this synthesis that's going on.
Yeah.
It's wrong. Sorry, it's wrong to discuss the pragmatic implications without agreeing there's a problem. I mean, I tentatively sense.
Okay, I agree. So let's go through everybody. Is there a problem?
There is a cultural male prejudice against women.
Well, can I make a suggestion? I went first. Andrew has interjected, but let's let Andrew go last and say whether he thinks there's a problem or not. But let's go through everybody that's still at their couch. I mean, inventive. Is there a problem? Does it exist?
I think there's a problem. I think it's twofold. That there's a perception problem and there's the pie problem. Like the physical, how is the pie distributed? I think there's some issues there, but that stems from the perception problem.
Wait, how the pie is distributed between men and women?
Yeah, or whatever groups you want to talk about.
Right, but we're going to focus in on the men and women thing. So if
right.
That's legitimate.
So in America, there's a perception that women are bad at math, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that because there's this perception, then the girls get less attention in math class and are graded lower, just like the papers that Hythloday was talking about, how they get peer-reviewed.
That's an interesting subject, because girls are worse at math worldwide, but they're better at reading, and overall in school they're doing way better than boys. And in places where they're brought up even in math, by focusing on girls in math, the boys fall way behind in reading. So there's a weird inequality there, even internationally. I'm talking in the first world where there is general education, of course. Okay.
Well, I was hearing that, like. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, let's just run through everybody. I'm sorry, I'll make a shorter comment. So, Paul, you weren't here, but we were entertaining Hythlodays' request just to kind of poll everybody on, does there actually even exist a problem with the treatment of women, or the distribution of work or money or anything? Is there a problem, a feminist problem, in the first world, in the UK? I argued if it's international, the whole world, obviously there is, but restricting this to the so-called first world, industrialized world, is there even a problem? We were wondering what everybody said, yes or no, with,
Well, everybody brings baggage to any situation of their history. Depending on the noise.
Sorry, we're getting noise from you again, Anaconda. I'm going to mute you for a second.
Okay, but I mean, we all bring baggage with us to any situation of our own history, and but to think that men and women aren't different in some way, I think is ridiculous in the fact that, look, at our body structures are somewhat different, so we can't assume that hormones don't change other parts of our brains and stuff like that and bring that into the situation. So maybe men are better at mathematics or women are better, but we always have those people who are women who are great at mathematics, and we have men who are great at literature.
Yeah,
So
individualism.
yeah, there's always that. So my whole thing is you don't bring to the table a pre-assumption of what that person in front of you is. You let them talk and you find out what they are.
Do you think in the U.S. or North America we have a problem though of bringing that?
Of course, we have our history. We know how things generally are and what we expect. We have to do this. We have to have filters for everything. It's like our brain has filters for what we see, and that's how come we have optical illusions, because we have pre-assumptions of a situation. So of course, yeah, but the thing you try to bring into is to let you know you do have this, so you filter that out as best you can to be as neutral as you can into a situation.
Right, we might have a liberal enough crowd that it turns out we all think, like I was saying, obviously there is, but yeah, but it's interesting because we're getting a different level of how subtle it is. So, okay, Anakanavad. Well, do you want to go? Yeah, okay, Justin, you're next in my row of icons. How about you say what you think?
The next point, if it exists.
No, you have to answer if it exists first. You're one of the people that has to.
I thought I'd already pretty clearly gone on the table and said, yeah, it exists.
Okay. Yeah, well, we're just not assuming. You're playing the let's not assume game, the lean philosophy. Okay.
Well, I just want to say to Andrew, though, if it exists, right, then the reason why it doesn't just fall, in my opinion, under the general umbrella of human rights.
Somebody needs to unplug or replug a connection, I think, a few times.
The reason it doesn't fall under, in my opinion, the general umbrella of human rights is because of prioritization, right? And if you prioritize by any particular, natural methodology as you might, by the degree and the number of people affected, it's reasonable for those people to ask for pretty immediate addressing of their problem right now, and that's obviously going to form a category. And when they ask for that, they want it reasonably quick, not have to wait under a general progressive reform of human rights. So they rightfully press for it under their own banner, in my opinion.
Okay, but hold on, Hythloday, you're jumping the gun because we're following your prescription here, and we still have Anakanavad and Andrew to say whether there really is a problem.
I thought we'd been through everybody. I thought you'd been
No, we had two more, so we're going to put that on the back burner as the follow-up, and you have control of the follow-up. We'll give you the floor after, but let Anakanavad and then, we dropped Anakanavad. Okay, screw him then.
No, thanks,
All right, Andrew. Okay, there you go. In my row of icons, Anakanavad, are you with us? No. Andrew, why don't you go ahead? Is there a problem? I mean, you seem sophisticated. I think you might be willing to admit there's a problem. But is there a problem? And then you're the last one, unless we get Anakanavad back and or Blinded Sun wants to add in. Okay. Andrew.
I think what Anaconda said before was right, that there is prejudice on both sides. Like, you ask your male friends to help you move, and you ask your female friends to help you decorate, right? There is sexism on both sides. It has worked for a long time. The prejudice, unfortunately, always has some casualties, and there are some women out there who are great at math, for example, and they are not given that chance from prejudice, and that's not fair. The question is, I think what Justin's saying is right. Is there an impact, and is it a bad thing? I guess it's the baby in the bathwater thing. Is the overall roles that we play as men and women taking advantage of the biological advantages we have as women or men? Is that overall a good thing? And we just have to try to somehow mitigate some of the casualties, or should it be thrown out, a revolution started, and some kind of sameness imposed on men and women, and ignoring their biological differences and trying to create an end result, equality? I guess that's another way you could look at it. If you want to identify is there sexism going on? Yes, look at the results. Look at the male CEO proportion. Look at the high proportion of women in teaching and education, which is my field. But is that a bad thing? Should we expect 50-50 male-female in every role in society? You're going to have more women be police officers, work in mines. Is that going to happen? So that's another part of it too. But I guess that's all I'll say for now.
Right. So let me ask you a follow-up on the detail of that, because I think that's very insightful, and I think obviously in the long run many of these things won't be 50-50, but I think aiming for 50-50 is a good idea, considering we're coming from an idea even more primitive. Let's try for 50-50. Maybe that way we'll find out what the right proportions might be, because there are some real differences. What I wanted to ask you is, okay, so it sounds like you're acknowledging that, in the way that people work together, the way individuals are, there's definitely some bias. Maybe that adds up one way or the other. It's kind of hard to tell. And I agree with this too, because, for example, I believe women have had a lot more control in the history of society than is acknowledged often by feminism. There is power there. It's just a certain kind of power that suits a certain kind of person. But so
yeah, I agree with that.
How much is there if we can say culture is something maybe somewhat separate from individuals. It's not just individuals added up. It's like the cultural almost is its own extra voice on top of us, that has an extra, maybe from history or wherever it comes from. Is there a cultural influence? Is there a cultural, the kinds of entertainment and shows and sitcoms or wherever these ideas are coming from? Is that warping the perspectives that individuals would have naturally, right? Because like if an individual grows up and has an attitude about women because of his or her interaction with women, I respect that. But if they have some attitude because they read a bunch of books and they read comics and this and that media gave them an archetype that is just made up, not from their own experience, but from other people's pretend experiences, that isn't okay. So is there a cultural, is there a trend or a flow? Is there an extra systematic bias? Because the reason I ask it is because I think this is what feminism isn't out there shouldn't be, attack an individual's views because of their own experiences. It's out there to attack like football culture. Does football culture screw over women for some reason? And that's what it should attack. And if there's a cultural influence like that, then it's significantly different than everybody's individual opinions might be this way or that way in a given generation. So did that make sense, the question?
Well, I hate to say that it's a combination of everything, because I just think that's such a Weasley answer, but there's a lot of things that influence a person's role or a person's belief in the various roles of genders. But I think another very important point, which I mentioned earlier about the Gamergate, is in what sense do you generalize your experience to all women? So let's say you have a child who grew up with horrible women in their life, a horrible mother, horrible sisters, I don't know, whatever, right? Would that skew that child's view of women in general? It might, but should it? No. So I guess maybe a part of the policy or purpose of feminism, or whatever you want to call it, humanism, is the careful generalizations that we make based on our personal experiences. And the media, it's all experiences. Like, for example, we see, I don't watch TV anymore, but TV commercials or sitcoms, usually men are portrayed as stupid, and women have to save the day, and they know best, and that kind of stuff that happens, which panders to envious women sitting at home as housewives, I guess. But does that attack me or attack other men? Hopefully not. It's just a prejudice that should be erased.
Well, I have a bunch of questions, but it's floor is to Heisler Day, I believe.
Yeah, I think some comments, Anna Canterbury type comments, and a bit Andrew there a bit. want to look at things on this personal level about how statistically somebody might be influenced, and look at this level of personal advice, like, well, we should, like Anna Cantavetti, well, really we should look at the other person's point of view, and Andrew saying, well, sexism is on both sides, and blah blah blah. You shouldn't let it prejudice you. That's all personal advice. But what we're talking about, if it's an existent problem, we're talking about policy to change it. Yeah, not and if it's correct, as I believe, and I think Pyro believes, that there are cultural and even subcultural engenderment, whatever, passing on of cultural biases and prejudices against women. When a person interviews, 6 people and 3 women and 3 men, and you want the best person to get the candidate, but yet it goes to a man, perhaps through his prejudice. We're talking about things like that. If it's true, and money, pay, same job, same pay, we're talking about actually, if it's a problem, not issuing personal advice, but changing policy. That's a frustration I have with it.
You're hoping to use policy to create an equality of 50-50 in all fields?
No, where on earth, right? Look, I don't think there's ever going to be 50% women pitmen and 50% men, and I'm not going to try to influence results. But something about, there are certain rights like equal pay and equal judgment on academic reports. I've cited nothing as stupid as that, but why anybody takes these huge straw man positions against somebody who's a feminist, I don't understand. Why would you jump to that conclusion? I've said
but I'm a feminist, but let me defend the anti-feminists in this, because we go to every single domain and kind of make a 50-50 judgment, like, hey, yeah, minors, 50% should be women. Fact is, robots should do that shit. No human should have to do it at all. We should get machines to do it. That's the real social justice warrior answer to it. But we do come with our assumption of 50-50, so then they do legitimately get to go, really? That'll never happen. And we get to go, well, let's see, and then we agree in the end. It's like, you know what, nobody should do this job, or if somebody has to do it, probably it matters muscle mass in men. So, you know what I mean? That's why they're reacting that way, though, to defend that reaction.
Right, but this conversation is hopefully at a more intellectual level, and there's been no examples or anybody yet campaigning for, I want exactly 50% teachers are men, 50% teachers are women.
Well, let's jump to that. What about the math scores?
But the point is where there's a will to take that choice, is prejudice shouldn't act against them.
Let's go to some of the difficult questions on that regard then. So, for example, girls in mathematics. Right now, girls are doing better in school in all of the so-called first world than boys. So, but they do worse in math. So, is that an issue? Should we spend extra money and effort in science to figure out, as a priority, how to bring girls up to par in math? Or not? Is that a 50-50 thing? Or not? It's a difficult question, right?
Well, right. Now, I don't know. I am in education, but I don't know what the differences are. I have heard that, but I don't. It could be a rumor. It could be true. I don't know whether, like, the question is, where is it coming from? Is it coming from a prejudice of teachers? And, by the way, most teachers are women, so that would be coming from mostly women teachers. Or is it a biological difference of the brains of girls versus boys? If it's a biological difference, there's nothing that can be done. But remember, this is an average. There are very intelligent women who are mathematicians, just as there are men. But on the average, on the statistics, right, erase kind of the individuals, and you get a general answer, and the general answer is a lower number of girls that are good at math. So if it's a biological thing, that's something that can be done. There's nothing wrong with that. But if
Right.
it's a prejudicial thing, then that is a problem.
So Andrew, what do you teach?
I was a science teacher, but now I'm doing a PhD.
Right.
No, trees are very terrible at math.
I mean, the math thing is a funny example if you want to get into the education side of it, because my belief in math, and I think it's indisputable, is that it's just taught wrong. For one, you need more than one way to teach math. Different kinds of thinkers think of mathematical things differently, and that's why some people are really good at calculus and they suck at accounting, and they're good at accounting and suck at calculus, and various other permutations of what people we use the wrong part of the brain for math anyway. We use the parietal lobe. All of the idiot savant type people, Mr. Calculator and stuff. It'd be better to teach kids math while they did physical education, because the part of your brain that knows how to catch a baseball is doing like supercomputer level math. So really, we teach math wrong to everybody, and I think probably in the end, we would find out that girls and women probably would have some patterns to how they understand math. You know what I mean? 90% of the girls would understand math in this kind of way that, 40 or 30% of the boys did, and boys would mostly understand math a different way, and with 20% of the girls joining them, kind of, it wouldn't be 50-50, but we could solve the problem by the fact that we teach math in such a shitty way, especially in the U.S., but even in Europe.
It's a bit of a digression, though, into education and that I think.
No, it's not a digression, Hythloday. Come on, that's not fair. This is an issue of, okay, if women aren't scoring as well in math, is the problem with girls? We don't pay attention. Is it stereotypes, or do we not teach them in a method that is suitable to them as individuals?
I can add something to kind of turn the conversation back over about prejudice again. I'm not so sure that prejudice is always a bad thing. Prejudging is always a bad thing. So you're walking down the street late at night and you see some guys up ahead of you huddled around. Do you cross the street? Depending on how they look, you might. Or you might not ask someone. You might you need to move, and you have some friends that are short women. You may not ask them to help you move because they're not going to be able to lift very much. And if you ask them, they may be insulted. So I think prejudice is not always a bad thing. It often saves you from embarrassment, and it may even save your life someday.
No, but come on, like the person that is my best friend, the friend, she's passed away, that was best at helping me move was a woman, and she was short. She also had worked at UPS, so she could pack a truck so that there was like no air left in it. She, I mean.
Okay. Well, that's a different thing.
Well, obviously, the thing is, the goal for me as an individual is like, I only want to make the decision of who to help me move based on individual judgments. That is not a domain in which I would use a generalization. But even where I would use a generalization or make one, like I think that African American in the United States, the African American community has contributed more than its general per capita fair share of awesome music. So that's a generalization. The potential racism would come down to meeting a black guy and go, "You're probably a good dancer and singer, huh?" That's an insult. Because the 10% of people that don't fit that, or the 20 or 40, whatever it is, it's like individuals are important. The person that defies a stereotype, just the 10% that doesn't fit a stereotype, that person deserves 10 times the respect and time to prove who they are as an individual. So that's where I see the difference. I don't think it's wrong to make generalizations about classes of people if they're purely statistical, and we understand that it doesn't really
I wasn't talking about condemning individuals. I was more talking about prejudging a situation, looking out for yourself, not walking down the wrong street at night. That's a prejudice, because those people up there could have been just regular
walking
people.
Down the street was a better example, so I guess I didn't even mention But the moving starts to be like, well, that's a domain where you just make individual decisions.
Right.
Now, walking down
Yeah.
the street, you don't get to do that. You're out there with the rest of the city. You're a statistical event at that moment.
Well, I'm prejudiced at the zoo. I do not go into the lion cage.
Right.
But I want to clarify, Andrew, because I don't think you give a clear enough answer, really. Does to the extent that it's a problem, prejudice against women exist? Could you give a yes/no answer to that? I mean, obviously, if you feel it's an unfair question, you don't have to, but.
Well, I don't understand why you're slanting this to prejudice against women. My answer was that there is prejudice on we make assumptions about either gender on both sides. It's how we fit into roles in society. So if anything were to change, I would ask that both sides change their prejudice.
Did you hear my question? Okay. I asked, is there prejudice against women as a category, right? That is a problem.
Prejudice in general is a problem. You have to learn to
Sorry, I was
push that into the back.
I don't know whether he's hearing me or not.
I'm getting a beer.
Did that question come through, Andrew?
Yeah. Yes. I just kind of 5 minutes ago just said that not all prejudice is a bad thing. But yes, there are certainly unfair judgments made on women and men in society. Yes, it's a problem. That was your question, right? Did I answer it?
Just about. I'll have to think on. You've managed to. Okay.
Like
right.
it seems to me like you're taking one side. It's the kind of the cliche that women are oppressed and it's up to men to change it, like the Emma Watson speech. Is that your position?
I just wanted to clarify your position as to what you said 5 minutes ago. I did say, I just want to clarify, and if that's objectionable, that I didn't understand what you said 5 minutes ago, well, I think that's a problem. But I asked you a question. It was quite, civil and to be expected. I don't know what the problem is there.
I don't think there was a problem. I think he answered your question. He said that some prejudice is okay, and some prejudice causes problems. And then he asked you to clarify your position, Hyfladay.
Well, I believe in many categories like earnings, statistics inform us of a definite problem. To a major category of women, for example, because I just earnings. I've already talked about papers.
Is this me causing this?
Yes.
Yeah. I think, Anaconda, you might get a Bluetooth device if you're going to do it on your phone. That might be a thing to try. I'm not sure.
Don't we prejudge everything?
Yeah, like I was saying, we operate on a lot of prejudging. I think prejudice is seen as kind of an evil word. It's not a great word. I think prejudging is a better word. We prejudge a lot of things every day. Now there are some casualties of doing that, and I want to prevent those. Those are bad things when we prejudge wrongly. But we do it all the time, and I think it's positive.
I think prejudging is a form of induction, right? We've seen an example of this person being stereotypical, and we've seen an example of this person being stereotypical, and we're likely to think that the next person is going to be stereotypical, even though that might not be true. And so
Right.
it's
It is a kind of, it's safety and being careful, I guess. But in doing that, you can make wrong assumptions and hurt people. Yeah, that's true.
So it's positive. Sorry, Andrew. It's positive on the whole. Is prejudiced? Is that?
Well, I don't know how I would possibly quantify all the prejudging that people do on a daily basis. That'd be kind of difficult. There are probably people who are better at it than others in terms of more correctly prejudging, I guess. But I don't know how I could answer that or how to quantify that.
That's an interesting point.
You
Right.
drive
So-
a car. Don't you prejudge how other people are going to react in a situation?
Well, let me add something on prejudging coming in, having not heard the last few minutes. I've noticed in my life, now that I'm 47, that I've prejudged a lot of people, but I'm in a lot of situations where I was liberal and ignored my prejudgment and went in open-minded and very proud, only to find out that I had been right with my prejudgment. So
Yeah.
now that I'm 47, it's a little more like, oh, I prejudged you. I could be wrong. Sorry, that's my judgment. Jeez, where did that come from? Because it's often right. So I think that's part of the problem we're dealing with. This is what I was suggesting a couple weeks ago is possibly the quantum mechanical part of our, when you get a vibe from something and you prejudge,
Yeah.
it's not entirely irrational. There is
Right.
a computer of some sort that's able to go all this input to one little output. What is it? It's a feeling, and it's not unjustified, weirdly. We know it can be bigoted and wrong, but it's still, you can't give up on it.
I think the point is, like, if it works, let's say it works 9 times out of 10.
Right.
We should keep doing that 9 times out of 10. But the 1 time out of 10 and it goes wrong, it'd be nice if there was a way of making amends to repair that. But I don't think we should throw out the 9 times where it does work and saves us in some way.
Let me say, what if it's 6 times out of 10? So I'll grant you, let's say it's 6 times out of 10. 4 times out of 10 is pretty bad, though, and I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
Isn't
Where in what? Where we're at in what?
Well, in many things, in a lot of these bigotry situations, not that you were wrong, you should cross the street in a certain situation, but then it fired off the same sensibility fired off in a job interview where this guy isn't on the street, he's looking for a job. And so I think it's like the quality of us as evolved apes is, I feel like I'm being generous to say that these instincts might be wrong just 60% of the time. And then that's the size of the problem, is that 40% of the time it's screwed up. But the 60% explains why most people don't steal from you and most people don't hold things against you and whatnot. So, it's like more than 50, but I don't think we're that far along in being able to trust our instincts, because they are these ancient, ape instincts, and some of them are just misplaced in the 21st century.
Sounds like Nietzsche there. That sounds like Nietzsche.
Probably.
Can I just say, I found this last 5 minutes dialogue by Andrew and by the other guy, is it Paul, I think, maybe?
Let's say Paul.
Characterized it because I wasn't here.
Not so much yourself, Paul, but I don't know. The feeling I get is the attempts to water down the effects of prejudice, right? Now, all that's being spoken about that I hear, right, it tends to, it's this idea of, oh, but it's good and I use it in a good way and all this sort of thing, right? I think that is very arbitrary and not arbitrary, the other word, anecdotal, right? And everybody thinks they're special and can do it. That's why the prejudice happens, because they think, right, they can make this judgment, blah, blah, blah. The only thing we can rely on is the statistic, right? And we have to say, look, men paid more for the same job than women, right? How are we going to act, right? Women get submitting papers, just because they're female, the quality of that paper is getting marked down, directly? Are we going to act? These are the only questions at issue. It doesn't matter that, oh yes, you know, oh, I cross across the road when I see a bunch of black people who don't look very nice, and I was prejudiced, and it saved me because later I found out they stabbed somebody. That's confirmation bias, right? It's just nonsense. Everything that's been spoken, I feel, is just nonsense and irrelevancies. Sure, they're individually true at times, but they don't speak to the problem which feminists are talking about. And I'm not talking about YouTube or hashtag bloody video game, Gamergate kind of stuff. I'm talking about debates that have been going on for decades upon decades about the way women are treated as sex objects, as you know, don't get the pay, blah, 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 blah. All this is just a fucking side issue.
Testing.
Well, I don't think it's the only question at issue. I think it's an important question at issue.
I think it's one of the questions. I did not say it was the only.
Okay,
I
fair enough.
said they weren't questions at issue.
I think that looking at everybody the same is a very racist thing to do. That the Chinese Americans like to be Chinese. They like to have that culture, and they like to distinguish themselves in that way. And Latino Americans like to have their big Catholic parties and whatnot, and that people should be able to have cultures.
Interesting thing. Wait, can I say something?
Everybody's portraying me, right? That Andrew came at me about this equal business, about equal jobs, equal culture, sameness, right? Well, that's not what it's about. It's about not being the victim of prejudice in things like pay, in things like, you know, progression through a company, in education and progression this way and that way, in being treated in the street as a sex object, this, that, and the other, right? I'm not saying, oh, you know, the Mexicans can't have their culture, they can't feel culturally distinct. But what I am saying is, if that means Mexicans want to implement laws or allow things to go exist which culturally bias against my climbing the ladder in a Mexican company, and sorry for any Mexicans who were watching it was just because
you're racist.
What's the name brought up?
Just an example.
Right?
Just an example.
Yeah, I couldn't think of your name inventive then. No. I couldn't think of your name for a second. That's all it was. But I don't know why it's strawman. The fact that I'm not saying that this degree of sameness, and feminists aren't arguing for this degree of sameness. Were they entitled to a fair crack of the whip? They're entitled to a fair crack of the whip. That's all we're saying about things like pay, you know, social esteem. Yeah, you know, there's a certain. You know, the people talk about teachers don't have the esteem that they used to have, right? And you know, if culturally women aren't held in regard, you know, I've said enough, but I get it's just annoying me.
We all have prejudging. What we have to learn is to push that in the back, knowing we had that problem. That's what you need to learn.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's good advice.
That's what needs to be
that's
learned.
Good advice, but I would say, you know, no. It's like having a fault-tolerant system. You have to be able to prejudge and not like fall for your own hype. It's more the situation.
Can I just interject to that point, Paul? Giving advice, and I've already protested about this kind of thing, right? and that kind of personalisation of the points and the political points when such a large swathe of people are subjected to this prejudice is like saying, let's solve the drug problem, right, by, well, what you have to do is just say no. Yeah, it's as facile and, you know, trivial as that to me. You know,
you're prejudging.
No, I'm not prejudging. I'm making a direct criticism.
No, that prejudging because you're bringing. You don't know what I'm thinking.
I'm saying that raising the point that you or we have to learn to. It's like
well, what else are you going to do? You don't know the situation. What else are you going to do with it? If you don't learn from something, what are you going to do with it? We all have our histories. We all have things we've run into. We all have different situations and stuff. And the only thing you can do is to learn from those things. And then you want to talk about, I have Mexicans living across the way from me, and I talk to them all the time. I look them right in the face. We have conversations. I don't talk down to them. They don't talk down to me. And how do I, you know, you learn from situations, and I take every person on their own merit. Now, that's what I do. And the only thing you can do is try to help other people do the same thing.
No, you don't. No,
oh, okay.
No, sorry. No, it's not the only thing. What I meant to say is it's not the only thing you can do.
Oh, good grief. You know, I can't go through a whole list.
Sorry, what was that?
I can't go through a whole list. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and this situation and that situation. We always have to generalize and break it down from there.
Right, no.
Yeah. When he says the only thing you can do, it sounds like a pretty good example. Come on.
No, it's about policy, not individual advice, right? Kudos to you for the way you treat people and the way you aren't prejudiced. I'm the same. But when vast swathes of the population are suffering significant prejudice, the answer isn't to for the Prime Minister or the President to say, we all need to not be prejudiced. I talk to people and I look them in the eyes, because that ain't going to affect change. What affects change is like what affected a prejudice a friend of mine had, a prejudice against homosexuals, yeah? And then when we was tight on money and not lost overtime, and hours were cut down to bare minimum, we both took up bouncing in Manchester nightclubs, and we ended up working in the gay village. And exposure, he changed through through financial change of vicissitudes, if you like. Right? No, and in the end he went, oh, they're all right, these gays, they're funny and blah blah blah, and they're just regular people. And legislation, and this was what I feel the whole thing's talking about, is about policy, not about personal advice to people, because I think we're all hopefully here not very prejudiced and treat people equitably on a personal level, but we can't implement such a great change.
That's one of the things that comes up every time that identity politics of any kind gets discussed is, do we solve this politically or do we solve it in our own lives?
I never said anything about politics, and I didn't say nothing about politics or laws. You can't do that. Of course you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is stuff you have to learn from your family, or you learn in school, or both. You know, as you grow up, you learn these things. And of course, I agree with him. The only way you can get rid of a lot of prejudice is you got to be around other people. You have to have mixes, to see that everybody is basically the same.
Your audio's better, by the way, on account of that.
I'm on my laptop.
Yeah, that's the way to go in future.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, or in the present.
Yeah. Well, because again, feminism is such a gigantic topic that you have to really sort of narrow it if you're even going to discuss it over an hour-long discussion. What is it that you're referring to?
Well, look, I think what do you guys think of my idea that I think feminism should get all international? It should be all Peace Corps oriented, and the feminists of the U.S. they don't have to give up rather on the idea that there's problems in the U.S. But let's do some international work, and we will see these examples in countries that are really much more obviously have problems.
Here's an example that I'm talking about that I've been talking about elsewhere than on YouTube that fascinates me. Russia now is kind of the politically correct European whipping boy these days, and they're supposedly challenged on the politically correct front. They're sexists. They're I don't know, super nationalists, that kind of thing. When you have the president being photographed with no shirt on and a sniper rifle in his hand, that the political culture's got to be different.
Big
Russia. Yeah, but what are we going to do though about like say Vladimir Putin, who actually gains from whenever we nail him for things like this? Like Russia is now officially, I think, homophobic. It's got like, what do you do if when you try and tell these people don't be like that? First of all, are we simply enforcing our own values, which are cultural, on them? And secondly, is it going to work?
Do you know why they're homophobic? I don't know the backstory on Russia, or is this a Putin thing or a Russian thing? Why are they like both?
I think it's
I'm going to say something that people don't like at all, but I think that it's just that Russia is generally about 50 years ethically or whatever in terms of mores behind everybody else in Europe. That's what I think.
Oh my God, you're such a bigot.
Yeah, not nice.
Yeah, that doesn't sound.
Again, they might say that as well, but they would say you're damn right, and we're going to keep it that way.
Well, I think that there's some truth to that actually, but I also think that Russia has some interesting characteristics, which you probably do too, and so on. But it's kind of hard to deny that Putin is an example of that.
He's exacerbating something that I believe is already there.
Yeah, and there's a macho culture. There's definitely an anti-homosexual thing going on that's hard to explain, really, because from a Western European and a U.S. perspective, they really are still coming down as somewhat liberal on a lot of their policies, but not really. Not things like that show that they're not very liberal.
Do you think that the average regular Russian, if that is possible, is a homophobe? The average normal Russian person, adult.
Interesting question. I wonder.
All right.
Well, it looks like that there's a bunch of. Yeah, I mean, it looks like they are.
Was the average American a homophobe 50 years ago?
I wonder if it's a religious thing too, because probably the odd American would also be like that, but probably because they're religious. So I wonder if it's a religious thing.
No, I think it's simply because they're I hate to say it, backward. And again, would you say that the average American was homophobic 50 years ago?
Well, help me here. Look, maybe some of you know Russia better than me, but they did have all of that communist time where officially they were atheist, and the real devout Christians and Greek.
Officially, they had no death penalty.
They had to run out to the forest.
You guys in the US haven't ratified the Human Rights Convention, have you? I know I think you're a signatory, but you haven't ratified it, have you? The Human Rights Convention. You're Canadian, aren't you? I don't know.
Canadian.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Well,
don't blame him for that. That's okay.
Yeah, well, I'll call all you other.
You can't help it.
You're backward for not ratifying the.
That's okay, Haiflade. You're Turkish.
Oh, is that right? Oh, we learned so much.
Or even worse, you're a Southern Englishman.
You're really trying to upset me.
You know what?
I lived in Newcastle. I know what that means.
That's uncalled for.
No, but again,
Put your face off and eat it. Well, that's the thing, right? I wanted to poke in Mendham where I have a chance now, because I was. Dude,
what do you mean? Mendham's here?
Talking about but he might join in if I poke him a bit. I've criticised him on his feminism point of view in a few videos, because he doesn't. This is what I would call a cultural significant bias, right? He's in a hangout with I forgot his name. The English guy, comedian. Oh,
Coughlin?
Coughlin, yeah.
Yeah.
Coughlin's there, and he's letting Coughlin joke, and he's joking about penis slime, let's say, you know, cheese. I don't know what you guys call it. Right? And they're having a right old laugh, and he's having a right old laugh, and then the lady says something, and it's in a lull in the conversation and all, and says something which isn't like hardcore philosophy or science, and he stomps right down on her, right? And then in the most recent hangout,
Menhem's a big misogynist.
he's talking to Carmel, and she says, "Oh, something's brilliant" or something, and she says, "Not brilliant, awesome" or something, and then she says, "No, it's beautiful," and he's going off at her because.
But that's because she's a terrible, terrible person.
What might be a bit of femininity, just making no allowance for. That's a prejudice.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. That's based on Carmel as an individual.
She's a terrible what, you said?
Person.
Oh. Yeah.
Well, I know you've been involved in disputes and whatnot, and
yeah, quite a few.
If you allow somebody into hangout, if she came now, you wouldn't. You'd allow a certain amount of freedom of speech.
Oh my God!
Regardless,
she came live because it'd be the first time ever.
Because of the
history. Just snarking from the sidelines. I'd be like, yay!
It's not just Carmel. It was another lady. I don't think.
Well, he's a misogynist. I'm not defending him.
Right.
I'm just saying Carmel is an exception. You got to get a better example.
Well,
There's
not a.
Well, I'll sort of chime in on my view on proselytizing or spreading feminism overseas. I'd say that's a dodgy proposition, but
what? What are you talking about? It's necessary. It's an absolute necessity.
Oh?
Yeah. No, please disagree with me. That's okay, but I mean...
I'm disagreeing.
Well, because I'm saying, look, feminism has made a lot of strides over here. I think there's a lot of things. For example, when some young 15-year-old gets raped, she's likely to be a further victim of, well, you were a slut. Why were you blah, blah, blah? And so there's things like that. But, hey, that we could dispute that because we have made strides. But in Saudi Arabia, our ally, women can't drive. How can you argue with that as a legitimate and even necessary, political issue or whatever?
Yeah,
let's
let's
address to me.
Blaming.
That was to Anna Kanavad. I mean, everybody could answer, but yeah, no, Anna Kanavad, and I'm just challenging you, but I appreciate.
Are we in a position to tell them that we're right and they're wrong?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you've just told the Russians they're backward and they're wrong. So
no, I didn't say that they were wrong. I just said something generalizing about Russians.
I think if this was evidence, there'd be no illusions of what you were saying, that they're 50 years behind, they're backwards.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is there's a certain degree of arrogance involved in spreading ideas.
Yeah.
It's I take your point.
Here, let me give you an example.
Okay, give an example, but my point is going to be, yes, I have value judgments, and I share them with my fellow society members, my citizens.
Okay, I think you'll like my example, though. If you go, say, for example, I'll pick a Christian country. I'm very familiar with all the countries in Southeast Asia, as everybody knows. But if you go to the Philippines, okay?
Pretty sure you're in Southeast Asia, but okay, go ahead.
If you go to the Philippines,
Canada, my ass. Okay.
You'll probably never see a more gay-friendly country on earth.
Where?
The Philippines.
Okay. Interesting.
Now, you will also see that it's profoundly Christian and Catholic. Yeah, it's strange. And gay marriage is just not going to happen there for the foreseeable future. However, homosexuality is accepted without a murmur compared to just about everywhere else you care to compare them to. It's considered a minor foible. It's not a big deal. It's not a deal. Usually people don't get huge family problems of it, but it could happen. But generally speaking, it's okay. But by the same token, again, you're never going to get gay marriage. Now, we should pester them to implement gay marriage, even though their society is 10 times more accepting of it than ours is. Think about that.
Huh.
I think we could learn from each other.
Well, you fucker, that's pretty complex. My mind is like all twisted up now. Thanks.
Or I've been to Tunisia.
So what
okay?
you're saying, what you're saying is that we have gay marriage, but they are actually more, accepting.
They have social acceptance.
Right. So we have gay marriage, but we don't really accept it in some sense.
Yeah.
And so we have a more liberal law about the word marriage. Well, I think I've solved it.
That was quick.
They're better. They're better. It's better what they're doing.
Well, I'm not
accept it and say, but we're not going to make it illegal. That's better.
Well,
like in whatever Sweden or whatever, we don't actually make pot legal, but we'll accept that people are going to smoke it.
Yeah, but I'm not.
Cafe.
Yeah, but Piero, I'm not ready to capitulate quite so easily.
Carlton.
Hey, Piero, how you doing? I have a question though. In the Philippines, and I've spent some time there when I was in the Navy, but that goes back years. But in the Philippines, in terms of gay marriage there, does it have the same financial repercussion that it does in the United States? Not be allowing two people to marry. Okay.
No.
Okay, so I think that at least that there then is
tax differences or something.
Well, no, I just think that that is at least one difference then. So I think the question that really has to be asked is not so much, is it, should we go to the Philippines and try and enforce gay marriage on them? I don't think it's gay marriage for the sake of gay marriage any more than I think if we were to go to Saudi Arabia and try and force gay marriage there. I think we have to decide what the point is of the policy that we're trying to implement or we'd like to see implemented somewhere else. If the point of what we're trying to do is to encourage social acceptance, then I agree with you. It would sort of be an absurd proposition to say let's go to the Philippines and force gay marriage on them so that gayness is more socially accepted, because quite clearly they're already there. Right. On the other side of the coin, if we're looking at this and we're saying, like there is in the United States, if we were to say that there are real consequences, financial consequences to the individuals by not allowing them, by not recognizing them as a married couple, then I think there probably is a valid reason even for going to the Philippines if that were the case, and saying you guys really need to do this because of this consequence, and we think that this is something that these people shouldn't be denied just because they're gay, especially in a country where it's socially acceptable. So I think it really depends on what you're trying to do. And sorry if I've gone off topic a little bit, but
my point is exactly that, Carlton. Like, what is it that we're trying to accomplish here? And what I look at it, like I've thought about this and about say Southeast Asia in general. These are all socially conservative countries. But even if you go to, say, Muslim Indonesia, which I believe I think they have anti-sodomy laws that never get enforced. But again, homosexuality is right out in the open. Nobody cares, even though it's a Muslim country. Now, if you ask me, this is something that probably predated the arrival of Christianity and Islam in Southeast Asia. And so homosexuality was acceptable, and they probably thought, okay, we're going to accept this foreign religion, but we're going to stay ourselves. We're going to be exactly who we are. And this developed a mindset among the people that it's a two-way street. We tolerate you, you tolerate us. In other words, it's perfectly okay to be a homosexual as long as you don't expect us to bend too much to accommodate you.
Like,
that's kind of a bad kind of demand for the majority to make on the minority.
Well, isn't it the sort of Norwegian, Swedish version of tolerance is that, those guys were willing to accept Spinoza in exile and red light districts,
Holland.
but it's never been legal. They've always during that whole period they were Christians. They're like, this is wrong, but you know what? You shouldn't be an asshole. And it's like there's a kind of tolerance.
That's precisely it.
Yeah.
In Indonesia, you can go to the mosque and you can hear the imam thunderously denounce all kinds of stuff, but it goes in one ear and out the other. Like, people just don't, the will to actually act on these prejudices, if you can even call them that, is just not there. He might sort of say officially, I can't stand the idea, but well, whatever. What do I care what other people do?
Interesting. Can you, for my benefit, and unless it's too big a thing to ask, when I first came in, you were just talking about, somebody made a comment about, do you think we should go in and do we have a right to go in and tell them that we're right and that they're wrong? And somebody else mentioned that you had sort of implied that Russia maybe was wrong about some things in the past. What about that concept of going to another, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it could be across the street, but typically into another country or into another culture, and telling them that what they are doing, that we consider what they're doing is wrong. Is that something that we should avoid? Is that something that we all, I mean, the other side to that coin is that maybe if we truly believe it is representative of the truth, then it would seem that we almost would have an obligation to do so. So where do you draw the line there?
If we know that we're right, then we have every obligation to go and spread the rightness around. My point is, we don't know that we're right.
Well, I think there's a question. I mean, you changed the word on me. I think there's a difference between saying that I know that I'm right versus saying that I believe that I'm right. Is not believing that I'm right enough? Do I not have to act on my beliefs, which may not necessarily be the same thing as what I know?
Can I a little very related topic is just about respecting autonomy and rights to self-governance, I guess, of nations, of the idea of nation-states and self-governance and self-determination. That's the word I was looking for. So yeah, it's a difficult one. Can I just say, this is opening up the bag to right and wrong and blah blah blah, and it's a bit of a tangent, and I wanted to discuss if I mean you can the victim blaming of rapes and stuff, whether that would be that Pyro raised earlier. Does
victim blaming of rapes?
I mean, if the majority wants to go off on and talk about this, autonomy and imposition of our values, cultural values.
If I could add something about the previous discussion, I think where things change in terms of when you might want to intervene on another country is if they wouldn't let people leave their country. You have family members in Russia, and you want them to come over to Canada because you don't like Russian culture, and they don't let their people leave. That is when you may intervene as a country into another country's affairs. But otherwise, there is a sovereignness of borders that would have to be respected.
Well, again, I think that there's a difference between civil law and what is correct in terms of, like you talked about, their sovereign affairs within a country. I think there's a difference between that and sort of the ethical and moral component to that. I think that they are, while there is sometimes overlap, maybe even frequently, I'm not sure that they're the same thing. So while I may have to respect their sovereign right to create a government of whatever type they want, I'm not sure that from an ethical or moral perspective that obligates me to remain on the sideline if I see something that I think is amiss.
Right, but how you act towards that matters, whether you act with a military or whether you act with a blog or media, etc. Right? How you act is important.
Yeah,
You have options.
I wrestled with this question a lot, and I couldn't distinguish. Maybe you can say it. I got to this position in my mind where I've always thought I was at the position of respect autonomy of nations and all this, but then I thought, hang on, what is it when the government, my government resides, I don't know, 200 mile away, and they put a police force in place to slap my wrist when I'm doing wrong. What is that other than disrespect? You know, the fact that they've drawn a line round. So if you agree to that principle, you essentially agree to if you agree to the principle of a police force, are you not in effect saying, well, yeah, we ought to go next door?
I don't know. I mean, unless you live in a dictatorship, in an absolute dictatorship, one would say that by virtue of the fact that you agree that you're still living in the country, that there is an implicit agreement that the people have given the government the right to do that. Is that they're not stepping on really on anyone's autonomy. You've given them the right to do that, and they're simply exercising it.
I mean, I have freedom of movement within the EU, but I can't just decide that I don't like the EU's culture and go to the States, can I?
Why?
Why? Because your visas, you'd kick me out.
Well, you can't come illegally, but I don't know if that's the same thing as saying you can't apply. And I don't know. I'm just saying it would seem that you still have some. If it was that horrific, right? If Hitler appeared in the UK tomorrow and started implementing a government that was just you absolutely would not want to live in, I think that unless, like was said before, unless they physically prevent you from leaving, I think you would have options to go somewhere, wouldn't you?
No, I think that's almost victim blaming. It's like saying the Europeans hate the Italians and the Spanish. They hate all the immigrants who are coming across, and the French are very racist. And we're getting that way. You know, the immigrants that are flooding out of Africa, just to escape their impoverished situation. The Americans don't exactly love the, and greet the Mexicans who are crossing the border and southern American states, countries.
It's the damn Canadians sneaking over that we don't like.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Seriously, what is with all the comedians? You're trying to rob our jobs.
Yeah, send John Lithgow back.
Yeah.
But anyway, I got your point. I see your point.
At least you're not the Australians with your Olivia Newton-John's temptations. Jesus.
Well, I think there was.
Who's supposed to resist that?
Not to bring up I suppose I already mentioned Hitler, so I might as well mention Star Trek. I was watching last night. Ironically, is it the Star Trek Next Gen episode that probably most of you, if you watch it, are familiar with? It was the one where Data, who's an android, Data, had this idea that these machines, these little exocomms things, repair units, were actually living things, that they actually were sentient. But he couldn't prove it, but he had reason to believe that they were. And so he disobeyed an order, and when he got kind of called on the carpet for doing that, to protect them, his CO said, well, you don't know that they're this, you just believe that they're alive. And he made a good point. He says, yes, I just believe that they're alive, but how could I act differently than what my beliefs are? I mean, and that's a rational thing, I think, and that's kind of back to my original point. I think even though we may not necessarily know or be able to prove that we are right in what we believe, I think the fact that we believe it obligates us to act. I think if we don't act on what we believe, then we're being hypocritical in terms of saying that we actually do believe something.
That's a horrible infinite regression, if you ask me, because what aren't we acting on? What bad things in this world am I not acting on?
I'm not sure. Yes, there are. Well, I agree that there are, and I think. I mean, I think my first answer there would simply be that yes, at some point it is a matter of resources. I can only do so many things. I can only object to so many things because there's only so much of me to go around. So maybe I do have to prioritize. or maybe it's a matter of, yes, weighing the risks associated with intervening versus the thing that I'm trying to stop, and where's the greater harm that's going to happen.
Yeah, like I would look at it this way. Like nobody's brought in Godwin's law here, but the obvious perfect case scenario is, what would you have done in 1936 when Hitler starts actually acting on what he said he was going to do?
But I think that's my case is I don't think I could have done anything of any consequence. But I do think that when we talk about our government, we talk about it as we sort of reify government as though it's a thing in and of itself. It is simply a function of the people, and so of a group of people. So I think that if a government, in that sense, I mean the people that we have decided should drive us or direct us, believe that another country is acting in an immoral or inappropriate fashion, I think just as an individual sort of does, I think as a group, as a country, they have an obligation to intervene.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is I was going to compare, say, Hitler to Putin.
Okay.
Now, is Putin persecuting homosexual Russians to the same way that Hitler persecuted, say, Jewish Germans? I'd say he isn't.
Hitler also persecuted homosexuals. Why not just compare that directly?
Well, he did and he didn't. I'll put it that way.
Well, he's not a Boy Scout. Let's say that.
What do you mean?
I thought Iran was
concentration camps.
Malmström was the number 2 guy in the party until 1934. He was gay, openly.
Oh no, they were all gay. So what? You had to hide it.
No, you didn't have to hide it until about 1940 or something like that.
I mean, clearly, yeah, there's a difference. I think.
Me.
I mean, I think there's other issues that are on the table. Sure,
you might be right.
You could get gassed for being gay in Nazi Germany, yes, but it wasn't the life ender that being Jewish was. Like, there was virtually nothing you could do as a Jewish German to escape that net. Whereas a gay German, you could just keep your head down.
I thought it was more like Hitler himself had Jewish ancestry, but they would overlook it. It was an exceptionalism. It was an exceptionalism of who's on the in crowd kind of a thing, and it was really more who believes in this Hindu spiritualist New Age bullshit than any of those other things.
Well, first of all, I don't think Hitler had Jewish blood. Reinhard Heydrich definitely did, but I don't.
Several of them definitely did, but I've always decided to accept that even Hitler did. But definitely, many of those guys, right? I forget which one. But the Himmlers and Giblets and all those guys, some of them were obviously.
Didn't they make out that Hitler was the right combination of everything?
Right.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I thought Iran was persecuting homosexuals, but that might be propaganda.
Badly. Iran is executing them publicly. Yeah.
They are? They are doing that.
Yeah. Which is kind of weird,
for example, then.
Which I don't like, because I like to defend the sanity of Iran considering its circumstance. But yeah, no, it's not all good over there.
Yeah, but again, you look at the Islamic world in general, and generally, if you shut up about it, homosexuality is a lot more acceptable in their society than in ours. But again, you have to shut up about it. Like in a lot of the restricted Muslim countries, there's male on male homosexuality all through your adolescent period, because until you get married, you have no sexual outlets. It's allowed to happen. It's accepted that is what young men are going to do, even though you have to keep quiet about it. You have to stay out of view.
Here's a related topic. If I could ask, I think Anaconda said he is in Canada. What are you in Ontario? By chance?
No, okay. I'm in Manitoba.
Well, recently I'm in Ontario. There recently has been all kinds of outrage over a new sex ed curriculum that's going to schools. And what's been interesting about it is that has been almost exclusively an ethnic and religious protest against it. And part of the reason is this earlier and earlier teaching of gender fluidity and homosexuality. And that's going on right now in where I'm living.
Well, okay, yeah. Then I guess the big issue is this a tempest in a teacup, or are they talking about something that everybody knows about already?
No, it's starting here in the States too. The same topic. It depends what side of depends whose propaganda machine you listen to, I guess. I don't think either of them can wash their hands, and come out of that clean. But
well, I wonder, are we still talking about feminism, because it's kind of like.
Sorry if I took us off topic there.
No, that's what's been happening all the time. I want to make that a part of. I want to make it part of the topic.
You've been playing SimCity.
My wife came up here. And heard us, and it's like, oh, a bunch of guys talking about feminism. Typical.
Okay. Well, here
I was like, oh, wow, a woman that isn't joining in the conversation, complaining about
being a
those that do.
sexist.
Well, I think women really don't have a right to talk about feminism.
I know, but
they're not nearly as well informed on the topic as men are, and
they're biased. Being women.
And they're biased, clearly. Yes, we're the only ones that have an objective view here. I think for whatever I will say, just to maybe kick it off again, I don't know. I've been asked before, Carl, you're a feminist, and I always answer no, I'm not. And the reason I do that is simply because I think feminism has become such a large umbrella term. I no longer know what's being included in that package.
Yeah.
So when you ask me if I'm a feminist, I'm unwilling to commit to anything and everything that might be there. If somebody asks me specific components of feminism, then I'm happy to answer. And normally, I think I would agree. Certainly, to take the simple one of, equal pay for equal work. Yeah, of course. I don't have any problem with that at all. But you had mentioned that, Piero, maybe it was you too earlier, you talked about victim blaming or rape victim blaming. And I've gotten into some arguments on this, but I think there are two sides to this, and both of them have validity. I in no way, shape, or form would say that a woman is legally culpable for her being raped, nor would I say that simply because she goes out in a short skirt in a gang related area where there's a lot of crime and she gets raped, nor would I say that the guys should get off the hook for doing this. However, that said, I do think there needs to be a component of rationality here and reasonableness here. Nobody is saying that it is right to rape. Nobody is justifying the people that are committing rape. Okay? But if you put yourself in a situation which has a high risk potential for that happening, okay, it doesn't remove the responsibility from the guy that does it, but it does call into question what you are doing in the same way that it does if I walk through a tiger's cage, before lunchtime and he bites me. I'm not blaming the tiger, but what the hell am I doing?
What you're doing is proving it's your right to walk down by the park.
But that's not the question. It is not.
No, that is the question. I mean, it's proving you have the right to do that. People like that are either ignorant or they're activists. I mean, a black woman getting on the bus, sitting in the front, might just be from someplace. Like there was a guy back in the 40s that was a leader in Africa, came to the U.S., and went, well, I don't remember what decade it was, but he went to a U.S. prison, and it's like, where do you hold the white people? And it's like, he was not aware. They went into a cafe, and there was racism, you can't be here. He wasn't aware of that. So it could be ignorance of the situation.
Yes.
Or it could be protest. Either way,
yes.
It's protest. Either way, if somebody is ignorant that their rights have been raped and taken away from them, or if they know that and they're willing to be gutsy and confronted, either way, those people are equal in the protection of the law.
I think, yes, they are, but I think the problem here is that as a society, we tend to think of blame, if you will, as sort of a singular quantity that can only be assigned a percentage point. So if you're 100% to blame, we kind of think that all of a sudden that, well, now there's no more blame to go around. And I don't think that is the case. In other words, I think that as somebody who puts themselves in a situation, if I stand outside, let me take it outside the concept of rape for a second. If I go to a bad part of town and I stand at an ATM in a really bad part of town in the middle of the night and start holding all my $100 bills that I just got of it in my hand, for everybody to see and dropping them on the ground and being an idiot, and then somebody comes up and robs me, yes, he is 100% to blame for the fact that he robbed me. But I am also to blame for putting myself in that stupid situation in the first place. In other words, the blame doesn't have to go only to one person. Both people can be equally to blame in a given situation if they put themselves there willingly. Now, you made that comment, and I would say that's true. If a woman walks home and she's in a city that she isn't familiar with, and maybe she takes a turn down the street that she doesn't realize is a very bad area, sure, then there's no blame there to be assigned. But if somebody...
No. But look, you said equally. That's certainly I would disagree with. But also, just in general, if she goes down there, she might just be saying, you know, fuck it, I'm going to take my chances because it's my right to walk the short way home or whatever. Right. Or more likely, I work in a place where I get off at the bus stop where I have no choice. That's how it was for me in the city.
That's different, yeah.
So, you know, there's like a firewall of moral responsibility. Now, your mother might say that wasn't very smart, but that's only your mother. We're not her mother. The rest of society has to go, well, that's unfortunate. You know, your punishment is, here we are, it happened, and there is no blame. The word blame or anything like it wouldn't even fit.
Well, no,
they should be able to walk there.
Yes, I think we're actually on the same page. I think we're just saying it.
No, I'm sure we are. I know you're not saying women should get abused in the wrong. Here's an example. I lived in Oakland, the safe side of Oakland, fairly good. My car there's things that happen, but it wasn't like, you know, oh, so bad. There were some people from the Midwest, a couple young brothers. One of them thought, why can't I run around Lake Merritt at dusk, a lake and you know, at 9 o'clock after dusk, I guess, you know, it's all lit. Well, he got beat up, robbed, pushed into the lake. Was that his fault? Everybody else I knew, it's like, oh no, the lake is really nice, don't go there after dusk.
It was partly his fault, yes.
I'm not saying. I'm getting distracted.
We have to sort of say, are we talking? Is he morally culpable or legally culpable?
Yeah, because I'm not saying it's his fault legally. No.
Yeah. Because again, it might be stupid for me to go into the wrong bar here where I live, because I live in a fairly racially divided community as well.
Okay.
But it's not the it doesn't exonerate anyone from having, you know, kicking my teeth in or whatever.
No, I agree.
Yeah, and it doesn't even. I know you're not suggesting that, but it doesn't. No. It doesn't even lessen the penalty that I believe should be applied to anyone who assaults me.
No.
However, I would not. Again, I don't like in Canada, judges I think have a lot more leeway than they do in the States. But in Canada, a judge might actually fry the person who assaulted me, you know, send this person off to prison or whatever, but say, now you, buddy, I have a few choice words for you as well. We're here, you're wasting the taxpayers' money because of something colossally stupid that you did. So I might not have any legal sanctions put on me, but the judge will certainly bawl me out. I don't know if that really matters to an American, but to a Canadian, that actually matters. We feel terrible if a judge has spoken to us like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you go into, right, it's like the old Bruce Willis movie. If you go stand in a corner in Harlem with a t-shirt that says, I hate niggers, and then you get the crap beat out of you, that's one thing. Now, if you do that once a week, yeah, at some point, you're the one that needs talking to, and that doesn't exonerate the people that are beating you up in any way. But it also means that you are part of the problem, and that needs to be addressed.
You're essentially clogging up the courts.
Yeah, I mean, you're actually, I would say you're even going more than that. I would say that you are enticing people to treat you that way. You are what's the word? I'm lost for the exact word I'm looking for here. You're help me out here. What's that?
Culpable?
No. Yeah, but you're encouraging this type of behavior. It's almost like you're trying to get them to behave this way, to beat you up by your actions.
It sounds like Carlton's position is there should be some prudence in one's activities in the world, and just And my comment on the whole situation, it seems like the whole slut walks and stuff, I think were really a waste of time because no one agreed. 99% of society does not agree that a woman should be raped ever. It's only the very tiny few that do, and yet those slut walks would have had no impact on those people. Those people are still around and doing what they're doing until they go to jail, hopefully. So it seems like the cry, the whole teach your boys not to rape, that nastiness was some kind of like metaphysical plea that the world should work a certain way, that I have a right to go down a dark corner and not be mugged or whatever. And that is insane. That's a stupid point of view, I think.
Well,
I think prudence is a correct, a commonsensical point of view.
Right. Well, yes, I think that it's kind of exactly what you said. I think that there is, the problem here is that they do have a right to walk down a dark corner without being assaulted. But we need a reality check that while that is the world we would all like to live in fact, that is not how it currently works. And therefore, when you go walking down that corner, knowing that, I have to, I'm sorry, but I've kind of got to wonder about what's going on in your head. Like you said, I'm not saying that the guy that attacks you is right in any way, shape, or form, but I'm just saying you're part of this issue. Stop doing that. We're trying to reduce the number of rapes, and the way to reduce them is not to just declare that you're going to be safe and then do stupid things. Part of that is your responsibility to monitor your own behavior and not to unnecessarily put yourself in a position where you're going to trigger that kind of response.
Can I generalize here?
Yeah, absolutely.
No problem. I don't know, with some Asian court, China comes to mind, but it's probably completely wrong. But anytime anything went to trial or judgment, it was how guilty and innocent are you in this situation?
It's a good point.
I think that rights have to be asserted. Like rights are what I can do or what I can't do. And so in the situation of going down a dark alley, I might have the right to go down the alley in a short skirt, but exerting that right might require a can of pepper spray or a firearm.
Yeah,
We're dealing with humans. Let's be realistic.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, and again, I'm not trying to victim blame. I'm not. But a girl, for example, who goes with a friend to a party, to a house where she doesn't know anybody, except her friend, and for her friend maybe to leave, and then for her, I'm creating a scenario here, obviously, but then for her to get, shit-faced drunk to the point where she can't even stand up or get off the couch, in a room full of drunk guys that she doesn't know and who don't know her, is not exercising good judgment. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't ideally be safe in doing that. You should be. But the reality is you're probably not going to be, or you run the risk, a serious risk of not being treated respectfully when you do that. So I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say here is I get bothered by the feminist position that is they're trying to make the focus so much the rapist, and it should be. I mean, he's guilty. I don't argue with that. But they're doing it, I think, they're trying to do it to the exclusion of exercising some sense of self-control and responsibility on their part. And that's where I think it fails as a philosophy. I think to be valid, we need to address both halves.
Another thing that they do is they generalize to all men, like those slogans of "teach your boys not to rape." They are trying to generalize that it's not just about the rapist, this tiny minority that nobody wants to protect and nobody wants to advocate for. That there's no power there. Where the power is when they have their protests and their parades and they say men are at fault. And you see that in all those different little stories that happen, like Emma Watson's speech and some of the other incidents, the football thing, and they're trying to condemn all of men for doing these things. That's where the power base comes from. That's how they can rally. Well, like that's what I said before. I think feminism is a power base. Is what it's turning into, anyways. That is how you rally and get power, and that I think is why they push that agenda. That it's not just about the tiny small minority of rapists out there that no one defends. They're trying to condemn all men in this, and then they can get people on their side and get power that way. I think that's what's really going on.
Elevator gate.
Yeah, that one too.
Let's talk about Elevator Gate. I think that, I didn't see her make a big deal out of it. It's not like she reported the guy. She was just saying, hey guys, this is the kind of thing that seems a little creepy to us women. It was good dating advice. I mean, it does seem creepy. There's better ways to hit on a woman if you want to sleep with her,
Well, you're assuming he wanted to sleep with her. She's assuming that too.
Well,
I ran into her once. It was in Florida. It was when they had the amazing meeting, TAM 5.5, and she's up in her. She had a room up there in the hotel, and she packed as many people in there as she could, and she even stated, and I, paraphrased, that I don't care if the cops come or not. I'm having a party. Here's a party girl, and all of a sudden now she's acting.
So what's the matter with that? Who doesn't want to? Why would we want to dampen down on the party girls? That's a part of my thing for the men's movement. It's like, really, you want women to have to? I want them
I didn't
provocatively and choose whether they want or not to sleep with you.
I didn't finish.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't let you finish. That might have been related. Go ahead.
No. But I'm just saying that Tosin, then she's at this thing here, and she's making a thing about something that doesn't need to have made a thing about, because a guy got on the elevator at the same time. I guess it wasn't the right situation. He should have somehow gotten her way so they went to an open hallway or something. He went into the elevator, asked her, you want to stop my place, get a cup of coffee? She says no. He didn't pursue it. I mean, I'm sure glad my mother didn't just cut everything off from my father for me not to be here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the thing is, he behaved exactly like women have been telling us they want men to behave. If you're told no, no means no. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, but she didn't pursue it other than that. So she was just giving feedback that it was a little bit creepy to her.
Well, everything is a little bit creepy. If you're not creeped out sometime every damn day, you're not out in the world.
Every time I look in the mirror.
No, right, yes. but exactly, but it's just information. I mean, I think a geeky guy that was like, hey, I'm going to wait till there's nobody around to ask her to make my next move. Why shouldn't that geeky guy want to know that, you know what, you probably would have been better off asking her in the bar before you left in front of other people. Women would rather you ask in front of other people.
Oh, good grief.
Well, you know what? But
no, it's true.
Yes, but that's going over. That's crossing way over the freaking line.
Well, then why do it alone?
He could have gotten, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sorry, but he could have gotten in the elevator and said, hi, I think you've got really gorgeous looking boobs. Would you like to come to my room and sleep with me? And if she said no, and that was all, the end of it, he hasn't done anything wrong.
Look, in terms of backing out in the world, if you ask in front of her friends, hey, you want to hang out? You guys want to hang out some more? And that would be accepted better. He'd have a better chance. Why is that not good information?
I'll tell you why, Piero. I'll tell you why. Because remembering way back to my youth when I used to hang out in bars, I wouldn't do it in front of her friends, because if she says no, I want the opportunity then to ask one of her friends. And if I ask in front of the group, I've kind of screwed myself all the way around there.
No, you don't understand how it works then. You got to study more of this Pua thing, because I'm sorry. Asking in front of the friends is a requirement. If you can't handle that, then they automatically go, oh no.
I've never seen a sign above I have never seen a sign above a woman stating, you must ask in front of my friends for me to accept your date.
Well, no, that would be too obvious. I'm just telling you
that'd be
the
too
reality.
Obvious. Yes.
Yeah,
I know how many times I've argued with women.
Your Broham are going to tell you that, but they are never going to admit it.
I know how many times I've argued with women. If you know we have a problem with a situation, you tell us about it. Don't assume we know what it is. Because until I'm told, I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Well,
I think people are. I'm sorry, but I think people, and I'll say
I don't
people
know
in
what a
general,
word means until somebody tells me what a word means.
people are way too thin-skinned. They really are.
Yeah, that's way too thin skin on her.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
And she didn't need to bring it up in the damn thing that had nothing to do with
I
that
think it was
subject.
totally appropriate for a vlog.
Now,
I think
see,
it's totally appropriate saying,
Well,
look,
she
this
was
didn't
on
bother me
stage.
enough, I reported it to the hotel. It didn't bother me
She
enough, I
did that
reported
on
it
a
to the police.
stage. It wasn't a blog. She did that on a stage. She did that in front of people. It wasn't on a blog that she stated this.
Oh, really? Well, I don't remember where she
No,
is.
she was up in
I'll
front
take
of
your word for it.
people on the
But
stage.
that
bringing
doesn't
this
change
up.
it for me. That doesn't change it for me. She was
It
just
does
saying,
change it for me.
it was like a blog kind of conveyance. You know? Like, this isn't the most...
I wish I could. I don't feel like looking for right now, but I have a picture of her with somebody stuffing money down her. Yeah, we hear you. We hear you.
yeah, I think and I think
Ice wants to say
here's an
something.
interesting question though. Just let me throw this out there, right? She made this statement from a stage afterwards, right? A public stage. I don't know how many people were in the audience, doesn't matter, but she did it from a public stage. Here's a question for her. How uncomfortable did she just make that guy feel by taking what was a private conversation in an elevator and turning it and putting it under a public spotlight?
She didn't give any identifying information at all.
No. Okay, fine. Okay, then that's fine. I retract mine.
Yeah, no, it's fair. It's like if he feels that, it's just a gulp in his own heart of like, oh, I know who she's talking about. Nobody else.
Oh, gee.
There was
Somebody
no
please
libel.
make a
There
list
was
of
no
places
libel.
No, I'm sorry.
Look, hey, well, let me
Please
add
make
to
a
this,
list.
by the way.
Please make a list of where I
Wait,
can
I
and
wanna
can't
add to
ask for a date.
Okay,
Please,
I think
so I
that,
know
well, that's
from
what
now
I'm
on.
saying is a value that she was making a list. Here's the thing I
Oh.
want to add to this. This is
For
Rebecca
her.
Watson, right? So we're talking about Rebecca Watson. I don't like her. I don't.
Can you quiet that guy? Thank you.
Yeah,
I did that.
There we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
So my point is that she did it in a way that just revealed how she as a woman was thinking about it. A particular kind of woman even. It's not the whole story. But I think it's entirely justified. She did not reveal or libel that guy. Like, for example, that woman that snapshotted these guys at a tech conference behind her, you know that story? And they got fired for making a sexist joke to each other. You know, that's more unjustified than Rebecca just said, hey, here's what it was. And I personally find her a little bit of a whiner, and I don't take everything she, says without a grain of salt. So, but I just think that it's ultimately legitimate and that actually it's informative to guys because it is. Women don't want to be cornered in a private situation. We sweethearted guys, Lonely Heart Club guys, might think that was a good idea, and it's not.
Yeah,
Well, I would disagree with that. I think that
situations are really hazy too. I think this is probably the best system for it because obviously there's other things to consider, like someone's retarded or something. I don't really know what's going on.
I think
the guy was probably shy.
I think the other part is, I think the part of this too is it says a lot more about her than it does about him. I mean, because clearly she had the option to think. Why not? Well, wait a minute. Why are we defending her and you don't even know what I'm going to say? I think she clearly had the capacity, and maybe some women might have actually been flattered that they were asked, and they simply would have said no, thank you, and that would have been the end of it. Just because she found this to be creepy, in no way, shape, or form means that other women would find this to be creepy.
What are you talking about? No. What? Let's just look at it. If we're talking about how women think,
there is no such thing. There is no such thing as how women think.
You're being bigoted.
Yes, I'm being bigoted. I'm going forward and being bigoted. I'm saying, in general, a guy might think it's better to get the woman in a private situation and ask her without any embarrassment. Women, if we're being bigoted, actually don't think that way. Women want you to ask in front of their friends, male and female, if they have male friends there, you know. They want you to ask in front because the reaction of these friends tells them a little bit of if their own sensibilities might be haywire or they're drunk or it's a bad idea or whatever.
Yeah, I don't buy that
They
at all.
would rather, well, I mean, I don't know how to, I mean, I'm not saying I'm some expert in women. I'm just saying that this seems to me like an obvious thing.
No.
Women and the whole player community of getting women. A lot of it is about no. You're supposed to partake with their friends. If you don't interact with their friends, then you're not really interacting with them.
No, sorry, Piro. I would have to disagree with that. But that's okay. Well,
no, it's totally okay. It's just making me feel like I understand women so well.
Well, you may, and that's and
maybe
and,
I do.
And bully,
I never thought I did Bill tonight, but okay, I'm going with it.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
women aren't possible to understand. Let me just state that.
Yeah, that's not. If your wife's still listening, that's not going to help you out.
No, she likes being impossible to understand. Again.
Well, again, okay, I had this happen to me years ago, and it was in a stupid situation, but it was very similar. This is when I was out working, and I remember very well. It was her first day at the office, and we were in the coffee room getting coffee, and I knew it was her first day, and I while I was standing there, I said, "Hey, going out. A couple of guys are going out for lunch. Would you like to join us?" Now I'm thinking I'm being social and friendly, and I'm trying to welcome her to the company and give her a chance to meet a bunch of people at lunch. Right? This is not a date. This is lunch, while we're at work. Well, she went and told the HR person that exactly what this woman said. She goes, it just made me feel very uncomfortable when he asked me to go to lunch with him and his friends. So I'm like, well, then in my book, I'm sorry, this is your problem. This is not a normal reaction. You got an issue there that you got to deal with, because I can promise you, after 61 years, I've seen many women get invited to lunch. And I've not seen any of them have a problem except this one. So, yeah, things like this they detract from the real issues of people that don't like women. Getting focused on these stupid issues, and I think that's a stupid issue, actually detracts from real prejudice and real problems with women in the workplace or anywhere else.
That actually sounds like maybe it's her individual problem that she had to appeal to an authority. She couldn't deal with you herself. She had to appeal to mommy and daddy, or in this case, her employer, to deal with you. So that might be an individual case, although that could be also a thing about some women who are raised that way. What's the word? Not aggressive, but the opposite.
Passive?
Versus boys, versus boys who are raised more aggressively, right? So that could be part of that too. But.
Yeah. I just want to say, and this is one of those things, and I don't want to keep this on the HR for a second, but this is one of those things too. Had that woman just said to me, Carl, it makes me feel uncomfortable when you ask that. Please don't do that anymore. I would have been perfectly fine and said, okay. I wouldn't have understood it, but I would have respected her request. And again, running to HR is the same thing kind of as running to the blog and running to the press. Instead of actually confronting the person with whom there is an issue or a potential issue, we want somebody else to intervene on your behalf and make it go away.
Yeah.
Which is not an appropriate way to handle conflict resolution.
Right. Well, I had a situation like that had nothing to do with sexual harassment, but it happened to be a woman that went straight to HR when it was inappropriate. You're supposed to talk to the person first. But Andrew, I want to ask you some questions because okay, so let me assess what your position seems to be to me. It's like you seem very reasonable, but you're not willing to concede that that things are all in favor of men necessarily, right? I mean, it's like you see that there's issues, you acknowledge there's a problem, but it's not just that simple. And I actually agree with that from the get-go in the sense that, like people talk about the patriarchy, it's not just something men are falling into, it's the women as well. and little boys are expected to be jocks and things like this. There's a lot of pressure. It's not good for the men. It's an attitude that's bad from both sides. So, given that, I mean, what the question returns to, what should women work for, right? Like my idea that, look, it's obscure what a Western woman should work for in her own society, because officially she has her rights. Let's her focus on international issues where women don't actually have their official rights, and I think that she will reap the benefits of, we'll see, really, women are treated that way in Saudi Arabia? You know what? There's something we do here in the West that's very similar attitude-wise, even though it's not legally as oppressive. And so they would benefit from that. And I'm wondering if someone of your attitude would object to that. It's like, why not feminists make a big fucking stink about what's going on in Saudi Arabia, in any of our allies, in any of our non-allies? Why not make a big stink about the obvious things? That'll help them, right? Because when a guy is treating them with that same attitude, in essence, even though legally it's not supported by the legal structure, it'll be more clear. So what do you think about my idea that if feminism wants to legitimize itself, even in the eyes of MRA, open-minded MRA, people that really are serious about what they're claiming to believe, they just go international? It's time to be the Peace Corps. It's time to say, look, we don't have to activate for clean water in the U.S. A little bit we do, but let's activate for it in Africa. Only feminism. And a lot of our accomplishments have been like that. Like, I think that sorry, what am I looking for? The contraceptive and using rubbers and everything in Africa, that has been largely a feminist activity.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. I agree that feminism would be far more. Am I coming through okay?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I thought I was making a good prediction of where you'd be coming from, that that you would be behind international feminism.
Oh yeah. Well, certainly there's far more priorities to be had for feminism in the rest of the world than North America. But I don't think that's going to happen, because feminists and academia, women's studies academia, etc., they get far more of a power base and funding and pandering here in North America and Europe than they'll ever get elsewhere. So that's why they remain here. But I agree, there are far more benefits they can have for humanity if they were elsewhere and not here.
Well, I mean, that's where we disagree again, then, because I think that it's very possible to focus feminism that way. You have huge foundations and endowments, rather, like with the Gates Foundation, where you can participate in international feminism that is a part of the human rights movement internationally. Just being able to get generic medicines and all the stuff that's going on with the Gates Foundation's doing a pretty good job. You'd have a lot more opportunity. I think we could sell feminism on that and get an attitude locally that's like, we're focusing on other nations, but mind you, we're not really done here, you guys, because that's what I think as a feminist. It's like, look, there's more important priorities in terms of feminism. And yet, it doesn't mean we're done here, because where you can see we're not done here is when some 15-year-old girl gets raped at a high school, and she is the one that suffers as a victim for a decade after that, instead of the jock that did it. Okay, so I think we're not done here, but I think that we can approach the local problem better by realizing, yeah, that's terrible for 5% of the people that might encounter it, but, not being able to drive is sort of more immediate. So focus on this international, not being able to drive level of feminism is a way to open up to the local problems we do still have. I, as a feminist, think we do still have. They're just not as severe as what we're dealing with internationally.
I think there's a problem with what you're saying there, Pyro. Is that I think that there's kind of two camps of feminists, and that the human rights feminists, as you would call them, have been kind of averted by another group of feminists, and these are the people that don't like to be offended. There seems to be this whole new movement in feminism where it's about offensive stuff, where if it's some guy was talking to me in an elevator and I was offended by that, or there was a video game and I was offended by that video game. And so these people had their own movement before of like, hey, we don't want offensive stuff said, and they kind of lost that battle because people have different opinions and there's freedom of speech and this kind of stuff. And so they moved from doing that battle directly and took over the feminist movement, and they're pushing a different agenda rather than the human rights agenda where we'd like to see them be.
That's the difference between the first wave, second wave, third wave feminism. Like I think that's what you're talking about, right?
I haven't heard about
like,
it in those terms, but you could.
Yeah, like no doubt there is first wave feminism issues in the world. I think that's what Piro was talking about, such as women being able to drive in certain countries. But what we're hammered with here is third wave feminism.
Wow.
But
I have a question. Have you considered the possibility that perhaps men behave differently now than, let's say, 20 years ago?
Well, they definitely do.
Towards women? It can be also that. I mean, it could be, though, that it's perhaps that women are more objectified, or everything is more sexified or something, that the men just behave more provocative today than
well, there's definitely something about that, because like this whole thing with we had in U.S. the man show and this kind of attitude, it's more permissive right now than it was in the 50s. When people in the 50s and 60s were more sexist in their actual lives, the media that we received was less sexist. And then when people got more liberal, somehow we got the man show and things that are, purely like enjoying the exploitativeness, and maybe justifiably so, because it sort of becomes a satire, an enjoyable satire at that point. So I'm not criticizing it on the level of like it shouldn't happen. I think it should happen. I'm just pointing out it did happen, and I think it's in reaction to some sort of weird situation where, yeah, we're getting more liberal, more progressive, more women's rights in our attitudes, but sometimes that makes us want to have art or entertainment that is, more repressive, or, harkens back to an era where it was okay. Or like right now, I haven't even watched it, but I mean, right now this show Mad Men seems like, it's like harkening back to where guys could smoke and sexualize women. And so there's a desire to harken back to something, but by the fact that we're harkening back to it, we admit that it's not the current situation.
But
there might be some glory in the past and pretending to be in the past, but really, we're beyond that, and so that's gone. Which I say is a good thing.
I don't understand. I have thought that, of course, they were more sexist that time, but not in their behavior. They were more gentlemen. Of course, they had.
Yeah.
Do you understand? I'm talking about
what does chivalry mean? Right. So if in the past we were more chivalrous, at the same time as being more sexist, what's the net result of that? Were we better to women, for example? I mean, I totally get that, because I believe I'm old school in the sense of I think chivalry and opening doors for old ladies and stuff is real awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah. No,
isn't that a kind of sexism?
Yeah, isn't that better? Yeah, I think that is a better. That is better.
Yeah.
That we lost.
I'm also thinking about today. I mean, this access one has to porn, every child, or every boy, when they grow up and so on. And if this have really also changed them their thinking, you know. And of course the women. I mean, you have pop stars making having a slut appearance or prostitutes appearance that have made men also more naive, acting in being more aggressive to women, like on conferences, or they are, you know.
I think that's often
that's a
attributed to
legitimate
white
point. Yeah.
men, in particular, that white men are seen as aggressive or arrogant and whatnot. And
That's racist.
Well, it is. Well, I'm talking about racist. I'm talking about.
I'm sorry. I just like to call things racist. Go ahead.
Well, yeah. I'm saying that.
Racist.
If you know that's kind of part of our culture is to be arrogant, and that
most male culture is that way, though. This really is beyond race. It's like every male culture around the world for the last 10,000 years has had this thing of like you're supposed to be arrogant and me, baby. You know. Come on.
I think the white guys do it a lot.
Every race has that. It's as a matter of fact, not just every race, but every mammalian species, you know, has that strutting their stuff thing.
Well, it's
we
like I watch
forgive ourselves for that.
I watch these videos called "Pranks in the Hood Gone Wrong," and it's these kids, and they head down to the ghetto and you know, ask people if they want to buy a gun. They're like, "Hey, I'm strapped," and then they get punched in the face, or they'll go and they'll fart on people or make a farting noise as if they farted on people, and they'll get punched in the face down there. And I think it's just you know, don't really say, hey, violence is great, but if someone farts on you, then I think you've got a right to punch them.
Probably.
And they go and they do these same pranks in you know, white neighborhoods, and the white people are like, oh, I wish you'd quit farting on me, please. You know, like and I just think that
and you're more aligned with the hood. Like, let's face reality here, motherfucker.
Yeah.
If you go fart on me on purpose, I get to punch you.
Right.
But I don't shoot you. Let's face reality. I don't shoot you.
They haven't got.
I got a question.
It's a ranked experience. It could be worth shooting or not, and it's not.
They've got guns pointed at them.
And you're like, well, they deserve at least to get punched. Let's face it. I'm disappointed in those howlies.
So that's what I'm saying is that punching people vindictively is certainly more accepted in other cultures, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, and being arrogant, you know, should that be respected as well? Or, you know, perhaps I've met some Jewish people that fit the stereotype very well.
Wait, are you American inventive, or are you Canadian, or what kind of?
I'm American.
Yeah, so we have that really strong, you know, because I mean, in terms of being kind of an affrontive individual, that's something we still have kind of a special brand with. Like
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
it's much more like should I make a mark? Should I really be noticeable? It's Americans are like, yeah, I'm supposed to be noticeable, and you're still wondering should I be? But basically, our assumption in America is, yeah, and let it fly, and what, you don't really amount to anything? So what? Rebel without a cause.
Right. Well, a lot of cultures would find that as disrespectful.
Almost every other culture, almost every. It's one of the things Americans should be proud about is this peculiarity, whether it's good or bad, is like, I'm an individual and that's good. But what if you're an asshole? Well, at least I'm unique. And that's an American thing. They don't buy that in Europe, as far as I can tell.
So, should obnoxious behaviors be, you know, tolerated in cultures, or to what extent? I guess is the question.
Well, I'm an American to the point that I think a certain amount of obnoxiousness is like garlic. It's like, make sure you're not just pandering. Put in a little obnoxiousness. If people have a reason not to like you, then you're not begging people to like you. Win. You know? No? Yeah. Is that not an American thing? I mean, seriously, it's like you do not have to fit in. To fit in perfectly is to give in.
Yeah. So, but you know, when you extend that to, well, you know, this Jewish guy just did signed a contract with me, and he found some loophole in the contract to really just kind of stick me over in the
Well,
end.
that's racist, but go ahead.
I'm just saying it happened one time, you know, and you know, and so then you have to like, look, well, you know, should I respect that as part of his
Fuck
culture?
yeah, I mean, you got a whole culture that knows how to do that. I thought that was pretty cool. No, you know, I wasn't until my 30s until I heard the term Jude, meaning that happened to you. And I'm like, really? But anyway, yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I personally I love the whole Jewish thing, and including if they can get you to agree to a deal that isn't actually beneficial to you, okay, thank you for helping the economy work. You know. Thank
Well,
you.
what about the
I
way
mean, at
the
least that guy would have never made a deal if you had, you know, which is approximation.
But
Not
then
perfect.
if I was to ask you about how the Iranians treat their women, then you would want to change that behavior and not respect.
Yeah, no, and I'm really sad about that because I consider the Iranians a super intellectual culture, and in terms of burqa and everything, they actually are right now more, you know, open to women being women, and I think they drink coffee with a lot of sugar and talk philosophy like we're doing here tonight, and I think it's a tragedy that in order to reject the oppression that they were being subjugated to, that they had to resort to fundamentalist religion. And I think that more than South Korea or other places, that they will probably more quickly overcome that. But it is terrible, you know. And the homosexual thing we were talking about before. I mean, some of the Muslim fundamentalist attitudes that Iran has subjugated itself to are, yeah, they're really abysmal, for sure. But especially because the Iranians are a very intellectual culture. They're very much a cosmopolitan, intellectual culture. This is the culture that back in the time of the Romans was trading with the Chinese and the Romans. So it's a very impressive civilization where it's especially tragic that they have some of these remnants. On the other hand, I would say that Iranians are probably have the best attitude about women's freedom in the whole Middle East. So take it as you will, right? Because it could be better, but the homosexuality thing is sort of even bigger because it's such a
Even Israel? What about comparing it to Israel?
Well, okay, no, not compared to Israel. You got to give credit where credit is due. I mean, no, Israel has a very Western sensibility, yeah. So, no, not compared to Israel. I mean the other Islamic Middle East, you know, like compared to Saudi Arabia or even Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, you go around the list. They're amazingly global, really. I mean, for example, they have these restrictions on Western media, but the real story is that Iranians have had access to see Western shows, be it the Daily Show or blah, 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 you know, more than anywhere besides Qatar or something. I mean, it's amazingly intellectual of a society. They just hate us. That's also a problem. We can't overlook the fact that, well, maybe it's because we fucked them over, but they hate us. Now they're against us. I don't want to be backstabbed. So I'm not like saying it doesn't matter. But I mean, Iranian society is like I personally believe that empowering them to create stability in the Middle East, I think that's a winning situation. They have a 3,000-year interest in history in controlling peace in Persia, and nobody else can act on that. There is no other Middle Eastern country that had an empire or any interests that successfully involved the whole Middle Eastern and Persian Gulf area other than the Persians, unless you want to include the Greeks. And I think it's pretty much too late to let the Greeks control the Middle East. That boat has that ship has sailed.
Yeah, they do enough damage in the European Union, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, it's sailed. So in the Iranians, but seriously, because the Iranians go back to having an independent kind of a civilization when the Romans were going on and China was going on, and the Iranian sort of axis, the pivot right there geographically, is why the Silk Road was able to supply silk all the way to Rome. Rome, who knew nothing about China, it was the Iranians and that area that traded both, easterly with the Chinese and westerly with the Romans. So it's a huge, historically, it's a very central point of where, like, world civilization. If you talk about the trade that happened before the governments even knew what was going on, from the citizens, from the individuals that moved silk along the Silk Road, that goes back to Roman times, and who was facilitating that between these two very separate cultures, East and West, was Iran. Iran is where, Mark Twain, East meets West. East did meet West and has met West. And, that's pretty contrary to how we see the Middle East right now, but that's really what their, 3,000-year historical footprint is connecting China with Europe and Rome. So, I mean, it's just, I think that's a part of our future. It's just what's already happened. Shouldn't be controversial.
Yeah, I agree very much with that, and it's a real tragedy. I know several people from Iran, and I have also the same impression. And yeah, it's a tragedy that Sham that time, that you got Khomeini growing up, and
Yeah.
I mean it was he was in we had some guilt there. I mean. But I also think that Iran, I see what you say, because this strong global thinking or Western thinking, they are not Arabian. They don't see they are not Arabians,
Yeah.
So they don't feel any brothership with the other nomads, the tent livers, and I also.
Where are you from? Where do you live, Baltazar? Because I mean, Americans were so clueless. Like the whole difference between Sunni, and Shia, like it was some subtle difference. Where really it goes back to when Muhammad died. It's kind of significant. But where the allegiance is really aligned. I mean, where are you from? Yeah, because Americans have absolutely no. We've only learned the most basic conception even now. And we still have no idea of how significant these differences really are. Europe, I think, Europeans generally understand a lot better what those differences are.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's in our part of the world. So no, I'm from Norway. So
Right.
we had a lot of immigrants when Khomeini took over. So the tragedy that time was that Sham, instead of yeah, he was just too corrupt, and the liberal forces, also the students, they were participating in the revolution against Sham, and then overnight they got Khomeini, and after some days they had to flee from their own revolution. And we have a lot in Europe. We have a lot of immigrants from Iran or Persia. And they are often taxi drivers, and they speak perfect English or German or something like that, and are high educated, most of them, because they have a PhD and drive the taxi.
Well, I mean, no, that's funny, but the thing is, Iranians, when you meet them, and they'll often be like, if they've left Iran, they'll be like, I'm a Persian. Iranian way you
Oh
talk
yeah,
about.
they always say
But the
Persian.
Persians, and okay, so grant them that. But the Persian, it's a very intellectual. I mean, I have a kinship to him because I'm like one of these people. Like when you invite this guy to your party, he drinks sweet coffee and doesn't want to talk any sports. He just wants to talk intellectual things like language and politics and the history of mathematics. Yeah, so they're like
Yeah.
super
No.
like that. Like they're almost a super geeky culture in terms of pushing that kind of thing. And it's like, to me, that's my
Yeah.
ally. There's an ally there. And then when we're talking about them being homophobic or too much Muslim influence on how you treat women, though not as bad as the Arabic world. And that's the other funny thing. People really don't get just how much difference there is between this Persian and Arabic attitude, right down to the language. I mean, the Iranians speak a calm, sweet kind of fluid voice, and Arabic is very bah, 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 or like we in the West would think of a German or something. It's very noisy and it's very angry compared. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but these distinctions are, they mean something to the people that are actually in that region, and we totally ignore them in America. But
no, I've also had. I also know people that are not immigrant. How to say refugees, and they are studying here and have studied there and perhaps working here for some years, and they are Muslims, and they are very, like you say, they are very intellectual. I mean, they love to talk about if it's art or politics. They are also very into and so on.
Yeah.
And,
well, it's the thing about the Catholic Church. On the Christian side, the Catholic Church, for all its obvious crimes, there's a very intellectual leg to it that we should all embrace.
Yes, the Jesuits. That is the
Jesuits. Yeah, definitely the Jesuits.
The heroes. I mean, how many great scientists haven't we among the Jesuits?
Yeah.
Well, they are.
So yeah, this is the thing. Well, our press is just really corrupt at the moment, and they often will even cover, why don't more Muslims offer moderation? Meanwhile, for the last 20 years, the popes have been meeting with the moderate and peaceful Muslims, and it's like, why isn't that covered? Why don't we make those people famous since they're actually already famous in their own communities? That's what you're supposed to do. Well, because they don't want to see it. And but it's going on. It is the reality. I think it's worthwhile, taking account of the reality of the situation. And like with the Iranians, I mean, I'm not very impressed with Obama, but that he would make this deal with Iranians is going to be one of those kind of Nixon and China type things where it's like, well, that's really
fantastic.
Good. Yeah, exactly. It's really good because these guys can help us over there. They have a bigger reason to not want ISIS. They have a bigger reason to not want, rape rooms or whatever kind of chaos than anybody else in the West. And Israel, well, what? That's a funny thing. Remember, I don't know if you guys noticed this. The thing is, after Iran did have the revolution, their secret service still was in collaboration with Israel, basically to the current times, right? Iran and Israel are actually the two powerhouses over there that are like, it's in our best interest for shit not to totally fall apart. We don't want to become Libya or whatever. And they have actually, their secret services have been in collaboration all these decades because they had connections from the time of the Shah, such high bandwidth connections that even though the revolutions happened, the people in charge of that kind of covert stuff, they were still able to stay in communication. And we will find out, I think, that a lot that's happened over there is a lot more collaborative because that is the stability. Israel to Iran is the stability, and the history of pretty much the rest of the Middle East is, and I like tribal people, I'm a liberal, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but the history of the rest of the Middle East is pretty tribal.
Yeah.
Those are the two.
Yeah.
Iran was the place that had a civilization. Then we imposed Western civilization in Israel, and so those are the two places that have, civilization basically. So it's a natural power axis that not only should be allied, but in this weird way has been allied at the covert operation level. And we're seeing it now fighting ISIS, right? It didn't take any time at all that it's like, hey, let's fight ISIS together. Why was that so quick? How did that happen with our biggest enemy in the world? Because it's not North Korea, it's Iran, and we never actually have been that super enemies with Iran. That's all political theater. That's my theory. All political theater.
And I mean, they should handle their problems of their own. I mean, ISIS, no intervention. Let them self-deal with it, and if they will kill then 20,000 more people of their own, it will happen. I mean, they have to clean up their own mess themselves. I mean, why should I don't believe that we are West are there to like help them. I mean, there's other reason for it.
Well, I think that's what's happening, right? This ISIS thing is that we're basically letting them deal with it.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're fine with that. We're fine with that. I think, yeah. And if we want to be our militaristic American selves, then fine. If we put in weapons or money for weapons or bullets or even people, then we still cooperate with them. And to me, I see that as a geopolitical positive, that we finally realized we have a situation where there are allies. That's the kind of thing that actually does calm down geopolitical problems like the Middle East. Is like, oh, I'm an ally with that country. You'd be surprised 50 years later you forget about all the, enmity. So, but also I do agree, we need to get out there. Even if it all turned to shit, we need to get out and let them handle it themselves. We don't need to just withdraw with it being perfect. No, it's like we need to get out of there, and if it doesn't work out right away, they need to work it out. So, but I also think that actually we can get out of there and it work out okay if we transfer to the Saudis, who I don't like, and Iranians, who I'm sympathetic to, and the Syrians, who I'm ambivalent about. If those guys could make a coalition that dealt with things like ISIS, how is that not the best solution? I mean, it seems like there's no way Europe and England and France and America could do anything better than those three local powers could do, even though they have faults.
I'd like to see a strong central world government to be able to deal with certain criminals, like in Africa, the warlords that will terrorize villages and whatnot. I'd really like to see these people dealt with, and I don't think it's any one country should go into another country to deal with it, but I think if there was some participation of a centralized powerful government that they could,
I agree, because I think the international corporations are kind of this anarchistic libertarian government where they don't really care about conditions, but they are actually governing the situation. So I think you need a real government that is, officially, constitutionally has to care about people to supervene this de facto world government that we might as well face we have. Our biggest corporations are not national entities, they're international entities. And how could you not have some sort of regulatory device that regulates them? It's just a negligence to not have that, in my view. But it's obviously really a controversial concept.
The problem is we have superpowers, so as long as we have superpowers, UN and so on don't function. If the superpowers were a little bit smaller, it would function much better, But no, one superpower can overrule the other, and so. But the first thing UN had to deal with is the Israel problem, and Israel just have to get out of their occupied territory, and everything else is just double-minded, and that is a bad situation though, with Netanyahu back in power.
Yeah, it might be one of those things that's both necessary and impossible, right? Like there's a lot of things
Why is it impossible?
Oh, because of what you were saying about the superpowers. Like the superpowers
Oh yeah,
are the ones that would have the
possible,
powers to do it, but don't have the incentive to do it.
Yes.
Anymore. Well, you know, I nearly broke down.
Pyro singing.
My ears.
I think the same thing might be accomplished with the proliferation of nuclear weapons. That perhaps if all the countries had nuclear weapons, then everybody would be under a threat. Like if Iran had nuclear weapons, we'd treat them better, and respect their right to be a country more because they would have that power.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be.
Yeah, I think that's the only reason. That's the only reason Iran's pushing to get a nuke is because if you have a nuke, you don't get invaded.
One nuke versus. I was in an igloo. I used to load B-52s, and I was in an igloo. And in that igloo, there were 28 nuclear weapons. Not just one. And they were like, roughly 1 megaton each.
Yeah, I'm just saying, spread that shit around a little bit. Like, if they had 14 megaton nuclear weapons, then it'd be at least scary.
Then you've got to get them there.
Yeah, that's intercontinental ballistic missiles are really tough. But it's always surprising me that there hasn't been a nuclear explosion in the United States yet, because there's just so many drugs that can go and cross the border that I don't see how it would be so hard to smuggle a nuke in.
It's making it, not moving it. It's a real problem.
Yeah, I certainly don't know how to do that, but I think the people that have nukes are well-established governments, and so they have an interest in not letting them go or whatnot. But right, like Pakistan has nukes, right, and they may have no incentive to set one off, but I think if they don't have intercontinental ballistic missiles, but so if they wanted to get one over here, they'd have to smuggle it. So I assume they've done that already, right? That they've gotten the nukes in the places they want them to be. But I don't really know. I mean, I don't really know if Pakistan smuggled in nukes or not, but they don't have the missiles to get them here, right? So if they wanted to, be a threat to the United States, you'd have to smuggle one in. And I think there's an opportunity to do that.
But I think
none. Imagine the ramifications if they would do it and they were known to have done it. You imagine the ramifications for them.
That's an interesting question. Yeah.
But it's a impossible scenario. I mean, if it's Iran or Pakistan, they will never ever try to nuke U.S. I mean, it's just totally insane. They are not that insane. I mean, they can have some nuclear weapons, like Iran. They will also, of course, never nuke. That is more probable, but it will never happen. But I mean, the only thing they can, if they have some nukes, they can do a little bit damage, be a little bit frightening. But if they do it, U.S. can use them. Just out of the planet, So
yeah, I agree with that. Nuclear weapons aren't something that you would ever want to use. You just want to threaten to use them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I mean, it is that situation because America is too big, and of course, I mean, it's and the idea that Iraq or Iran would use Israel, I mean, that is crazy. Because of course, if they do this, they know that U.S. and all Europe will be in there and take over the country. That will happen. And that is also right, and it's ridiculous to think they are so stupid.
Well, I think the conversation might be winding down. Should we think about heading off?
Yeah.
Yep, it's been going on for a few hours, so I think I'm taking off. But I'll see you guys maybe next week.
What?
Sounds good.
Heroes?
Really? So everybody left while I was gone. Typical. 3 hours in. 3 hours and 20 minutes in, and people just leave when I'm taking a break. Typical. What the hell? What the heck? I guess the Middle East was too much for them to handle on their own. Needs me. I should have stayed around. I'm sorry. So sorry. So I guess that means it's only 3 hours and 20 minutes today. Well, that's fine. I've got work to do that I can turn my mind to. So farewell, everybody, from the abandoned hangout at a mere 3 hours. Everybody's like, well, we need to go. It's going to fall apart if we talk about the Middle East without Piero. No, it's too late, Huck. You can't save the room now. Coming in at this late moment, unless
there was only 3 left when I left. No, in fact, there was 2 left when I left.
Those fucking bailers. Can't you take a break without these guys all bailing? But again, I'm being a little sarcastic because I guess 3 hours is enough. I have other stuff to do myself. So.
Yeah, I was watching the YouTube thing to see what you would do because I noticed you were the only one left in the room.
Well, you're not Sugarland Ren, are you?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. I recognized your voice. Cool. Well, nice to see you. Nice to see you. Yeah, well, I guess we better end it. I was trying to end it on a sarcastic note as if I didn't think it should end, but probably should.
Okay, I'll let you soliloquize and then leave.
Well, I'm done soliloquizing, so thanks for you're the exclamation point.
All right, take care.
All right, take care, everybody, and you and Sugarland Ren and everybody else. Bye-bye.